The following program contains mature language and spoilers. Listener discretion advised.
The Marvel superheroes have arrived! Captain America,
Fantastic Four,
Hulk, Spider-Man, Iron Man,
Spider-Woman,
the God of Thunder,
You want to do some sort of a one-year retrospective thingy? If you want to, go for it.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Marvel Superheroes Podcast. I'm a legal machine, and with me is... And also, featuring, guest starring, why don't you go, Diabolu Frank? Diabolu Frank.
Go what? Exactly.
Say your name.
Diabolu Frank.
And?
Mr. Fixit.
That was Mr. Fixit.
Such enthusiasm.
Didn't really say it into the microphone.
No.
Mr. Fixit.
What we need to do is just get a phone-shaped microphone, and you would talk directly into it every single podcast.
I've done that with him already. It's whenever I call him by remote, I don't bother with Skype, I call him on the phone and let him talk into the phone. It works out pretty well, actually. The speakers are better. The microphone is better on his phone.
How does it sound on the phone?
It sounds okay. I mean, it's obviously not in the room or anything, but compared to that Skype session where you were practically inaudible, much better.
Which one was
The
that?
Alpha Flight one, where it was just like,
Right.
Alpha Flight.
Well, that and I understand that you guys attempted to do a podcast together for the Iron Man episode, and that was similarly
That was my
doomed.
fault, though. It was because I don't have a mixer, so I was trying to ghetto do it, and it didn't work.
Didn't work out. Okay,
I was trying to record the phone call using a phone app.
Oh,
Yeah. Desperate times call
So
for
did I
desperate
sound like
measures.
Alice in Chains in that one?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because the microphone was on
Did
your
I
tit.
sound like Alice in Chains in that one?
Sorry, you don't speak through your tit, so I could not hear you. No, if you sound like Alice in Chains, then I would have been like, hell yeah, this is fucking awesome.
All right.
Too
so
bad
what are
the
we
guy
doing?
saying this killed himself. Oh.
well, Mac wanted to do some sort of one-year retrospective.
Yeah, we're coming up on our 1 year of podcasting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you think about what do you think about podcasting?
I'm still not sure he's aware that he's in podcasting. I think Count Drunkle is right.
Hey, did you know that we've been recording you for a year?
I did not know that.
Holy
that
shit.
people across this nation and other nations can actually hear you talking impassively about stuff.
You know,
when we can catch your attention with shiny objects for long enough.
Will you repeat
you know,
something
I
that was
usually have my
just said?
eyes closed during these shows. I usually just close my eyes and just talk when I'm spoken to.
It's well documented how many times you've fallen asleep during the recordings of a podcast.
You had a streak going where every single time we recorded, you ended it snoring. And then there was the one time where you were like, fuck you, dude, I don't fall asleep. And then that night you fell asleep during the podcast and kept the streak going.
Yeah.
And then we went back to the Dune episode for Rolled Spine, and you fell asleep during that one too. And you were snoring, and we had to call you out because you could sleep, but you couldn't snore while we were recording. So
Let's talk. When you think of our podcast, just say like a quick sentence that comes to your mind. Go, you, Diabolu Frank.
melatonin, because it's apparently an excellent sleep aid for Mr. Fixit.
Mr. Fixit, just what's the first thing? Whenever you hear, hey, we're going to get together and do a Marvel Superheroes Roll Spine podcast, what comes to your mind?
Troublemakers.
Jesus.
That was my
Put a
cock in the
punctuate-
floor.
That was, oh my god!
That's quite the punctuation mark on that comment.
Another one. Go do another one.
illegal machine.
I don't know. I'm not sure I'm really down for this whole line of questioning.
I mean, so you did blogging for years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a pretty big change going to.
Well, that's just an evolution for you, wouldn't it be?
Well, here's the thing with blogging. I had the Web TV page for the Idlehead and some other random shit back when Web TV was a thing that people would know what you were talking about vaguely. Not that it was ever that big. And then I went away for a long time, and then I read other people's blogs, and I liked that, and I did the stuff that they were doing. And then I think that blogging has died, and now everybody's podcasting, and it's more, you connect better with audiences verbally than you do through text, especially in our modern world. I can listen to somebody talk to me while I'm driving through Houston traffic much easier than when I get home and have to sit down and try to read them while my eyes are crossing because I'm too goddamn tired to read anything. So I understand, just as a receiver of this material, how much easier it is to enjoy a podcast versus the written word, especially on it as intangible a medium as the internet, because shit just disappears one day, you know,
Yeah,
or people don't find you because you no longer pop up on the search results the way that you used to. But I really like it because I'm listening. There's a greater sense of community because I'm listening to other people's podcasts. People are listening to our podcast. We're all responding to one another to some degree, whether it's through Twitter or comments or what have you.
Or other podcasts.
Yeah. I find it more rewarding personally. I mean, cause you got things you want to say. You want to talk about things. And for me, like back when we were in the comic shop, that was good because we could just hang out and bullshit. But it was bad because there were other people there and most of the other people suck. Like the rest of the world, other people are always the problem. Sartre would certainly agree. So it's nice where you can kind of have this controlled arena where you can have these conversations and they can be winding, things that go in all different places, or you can concentrate on one topic and explore it and enjoy it with people whose opinions you value. Whereas if I try to talk to somebody at work or someplace out in the world about stuff and they're morons and they have nothing interesting to contribute, or they get super offended because you say something without thinking that, oh, there's another human being that's speaking to you and either expressing their opinion or maybe trying to instigate even, and you can get a rise out of somebody for giggles, or you can do it to get them thinking or get them talking. But some people just want to stop talking entirely and shut down and disregard you as another human being. So I just prefer this. I like having discourse in this format. I like having this opportunity to connect with other people, but also to have these penetrating conversations that you couldn't have with just anybody and under just any circumstances necessarily.
Wow. What about you?
I like talking. I talk a lot.
I like to talk.
I talk a lot. I enjoy it talking.
You really enjoy the podcasts when you are actually getting to expose them to other people.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a thing here, Mr. Fixit. You're proud enough of what this fucking shitstorm is that you'll tell your friends, "Hey, man, check out my podcast."
Well, no,
is that cool? I mean, that's something.
Well, no. That's what I like about Mr. Fixit. What he does, he doesn't fucking do that shit. What he does is he blind taste tests these motherfuckers. Yeah. He'll put our podcast on. They'll listen to it. They'll get involved with it, and then they're like, "Hey, this shit's good. What's this podcast?"
But you already talked, so let's let him talk.
So, like Frank says, I don't really advertise this as more as in I actually go in blind taste.
Yeah,
blind test our
motherfucking Roll
show.
Spine Challenge.
Yeah, I'll go and I'll put on some of the other podcasts.
We're not trying to make enemies.
Dude, I'm not. I'm being honest. I put their podcast with ours and that's it.
Don't be too honest because you don't want to.
Yeah, that's too honest.
Yeah, that's
well, then what's the point?
That means that we're not joking anymore.
You just say other. Yeah.
People, hey, your podcast sucks for real.
You can say
other people think your podcast sucks.
You can say other podcasts. There's tons of podcasts out there.
Dude, you asked my opinion. I'm telling you my fucking opinion.
That's why I gave you your opinion. Just tell me what I said.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry. I should have let you talk.
No, just let him talk then. It's easier that way.
No, but I'm saying, that's something we could. 12 months ago, we weren't able to do that. You weren't able to put on several podcast people and go, you know what? I like the podcast you do. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't even tell them it's me. I just put on the podcast. I don't ever tell them unless they guess it's me.
Well,
I don't tell them. I just put on the podcast. I tell them, listen to it. What do you think?
He has done that. He's actually fucking secretly advertised his own podcast without letting them know that he's on it. And they don't catch it.
Go, oh shit, that's cool. You know that it's your podcast.
Yeah, but I don't tell them.
I know you don't tell them.
I'll tell. Yeah,
I know. But you're not like shit. Yeah, you're not thinking to yourself shit. Yeah, that's a good podcast.
I like to see what they think, and I don't even ask them. Well, what'd you think? Oh, that sounds like me when my friends hang out. Or what?
And how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel?
No, it's like that's just me and my friends hanging out. It's not like I'm here to perform. I come here to hang out and bullshit.
You don't have a sense of pride when people say, you know what? This podcast is pretty fucking good. And you think, shit, yeah, it's pretty good because it's me and my buddies and we know what the fuck we're doing and this shit's pretty good.
Oh, when Frank puts all his work into it, yeah. But I mean, I'm not like, oh, that's me. Listen to me. I could care less. Dude, if the mics were here or they weren't here,
I think that pretty well sums up Fix. I could care less.
Yeah. If the mics were here or they weren't here, I would still be bullshitting with y'all with the same stuff, except it wouldn't be, save it for the podcast. It'd be more like,
I know, but I don't know. For me, whenever I listen
I really do wish he had one of those little lapel mics like they have on the television and we just catch whatever he says and I'd edit out the stuff that isn't interesting. That would probably work better than this whole arrangement.
I try. You're saying? I'm
just saying. I listen to some of our podcasts, and I'm genuinely proud of how some of these turn out. Where I'm like, holy shit! That not only like the sound quality is good, the editing is good. I sometimes think we have very concise, differing opinions, but I will sometimes go like, holy shit! You know what? That actually makes sense. I'm glad we talked about that, and now I'm looking at it differently. And I know we do that anyway, right? That's why we do this stupid podcast. It's because we did this before. But so I like the fact that other people can listen to this stuff, and we get people critical thinking, and they disagree, and they don't disagree, and
If anything, and Frank can contest to this, I always compliment on all the work he puts into it, like all the little stuff that I hear. Because I mean, we've known each other almost 20 years, so. I mean, us fighting and arguing about stuff is pretty normal for me, but like, all that other stuff you put in there that makes us sound way cooler than I think we are.
It's definitely a polished version of us.
Yeah.
It's not a raw, unfiltered or anything.
Yeah, because if they listen to...
well, this is the thing, though, is we have numerous streams of podcasts that you can listen to, and I tend to isolate...
I've been told.
We have several streams.
And I try to isolate stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that I do solo, and I edit that shit, too, but it's nowhere near as good as the stuff that we do as a group because engaging with one another and one-upping one another and shouting each other's opinions at one another, the energy that has and the variety of perspectives, the variety of views are much more entertaining than just one guy going, so it doesn't matter how much I edit if I don't have the raw material to work with from the first place. So if you guys weren't the interesting fellows that you are and we didn't have the chemistry we have together, it still wouldn't be a good show.
And it still may not be a good show. Look, I don't care.
I think it's a good show because I listen to a bunch of podcasts and I enjoy listening to us. I enjoy listening to you. I mean, obviously you're my friends, but you guys are sometimes full of shit and I don't want to hear the crap that's coming out of your mouths.
Lots of times.
But when I listen to the podcast, I still find that entertaining as an objective listener to the best degree that I'm capable of being so.
Right. So I think we can give ourselves a little Cub Scout patch for good podcast, check mark.
I do think we get our Cub Scout patch for podcasting.
That's all I'm saying. So just fucking put a patch on, man.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Hey,
also archery.
Hey, just archery and put a patch on it, man.
Yeah. I still don't know what we're doing. This is all Mac's idea.
Hey guys, thanks for the year of memories.
Memories.
It's like a creepy Casey Kasem.
A creepy Casey Kasem. I think that makes it come all the way back around. It's just a normal guy talking about it.
It's been an interesting year, definitely.
It's been different, yeah.
I mean,
I don't think we've ever busted on poor Fixit as much in all of the years we've been together as we have on trying to get him on fucking task and doing a goddamn podcast.
If someone were to be here and listen to us uncut,
oh God, we'd all be in jail.
Yeah, it's man, you.
If you think that this is unfiltered, all the fucks and shits and rapey jokes and stuff like that. Us, when we're completely, exposed, there's a reason why they put people in jail for that shit.
So here's another thing, though. Like, I did not read comic books anymore, right?
Yeah.
So this has got me kind of back in the... we can talk about stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. Because we didn't talk about comic books anymore, right?
No.
We kind of stopped talking about comic books.
Well, I mean, but we did a whole conversation on the Confederate flag and race relations and stuff, the sort of thing that we probably shouldn't have on the air. But we still had interesting things to talk about. It's nice, though, that you get to be part of the geekier stuff where me and Fixit used to just kind of...
I'm talking about comic books.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
we would have done
nice.
that if it weren't for the podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it. Well, sometimes you have to narrow your focus some, too, because there's a lot of podcasts out there where you would never find them because they've got so many different random-ass topics that they go across. How do you separate them from the herd? At least amongst comic book ones, you can kind of isolate yourself.
Well, what made you decide that you want to do this? Because, I still remember the first day we did it at Mac's house. Mm-hmm. You bringing all the stuff together. We're sitting at the table, and you're like, all right, let's podcast. And I remember thinking, what the fuck are we doing? And you're like, well, just talk, be yourself. And I'm like, I was very skittish. I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? I don't get what he wants.
That's what I'm saying.
This is not the tune the monkey usually dances to. This is very unusual for the monkey to dance to.
If you go back and listen to our Zero episode, we've all grown quite a bit when it terms
or in our ability to present ourselves.
Unquote, it sounds so stupid, quote unquote, broadcasting. But you get more comfortable with the microphone in front of your head, and you start thinking differently before the mics turn on. You pre-think your plans a little bit more, your thoughts a little bit more. You start to anticipate questions you're going to ask, and I don't think we interrupt each other as much as we used to.
Bullshit.
Well, so see how I paused, you say bullshit, and then I started talking again? Before we were just going blah, 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 and talking over each other.
True.
So that's what I'm saying. I think we've grown a bit. Over the years.
No, I'd agree with that, definitely.
It's been fun.
No, but you were talking about why we were getting that started. It's just like I was saying I saw people do blogging and I was like, well, I could take the stuff that I used to do on my little internet site, which itself was just like, oh, that's other people have internet sites. I want to have an internet site too. They talk about superheroes. I'll talk about a superhero, but mine will be Martian Manhunter because I'm interested in this character right now and nobody else is covering him the way that I wanted him covered. Well, then when I did the blogs, it's like, well, these guys are doing sort of what I did on the website, but they're doing it as a daily piece instead of having to try to put together an entire site and have everything all together all at once. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do daily blogging and I'll slowly build that site day by day the way that I had back in the day. And that's how I ended up having the blog sites that I had. Well, with this, I didn't really listen to podcasts. And then two of the blogs that I followed, Firestorm Fan and the Aquaman Shrine, they merged together. And
Our
they
good
did,
friends.
Yes, our good friends. So they got together and they decided they were going to do a podcast. There was already a lot of podcasts out there, and Shag had already been working with other guys at other podcasts, so he had some experience with that. And I listened to it and I liked it. And I was like, well, I'd like to do something like that. And, I appeared on their podcast within the first few months. Because I was the loudest commentator that they had at the time. And then there were like a couple of guys in particular that I thought would be kind of cool. Since I'm the Marsh Manhunter guy, well, let's go with Ange, the Supergirl guy, and we'll do the
Shout out Ange.
Yeah, Red Sun, Red Planet podcast, but he doesn't seem like he's interested in podcasting. Plus, he's an ER doctor, so I think he's probably kind of busy for trying to work out the kind of schedules that would come with that.
Shout out ER doctors.
And then Luke Giaconetti, he was doing podcasts, and he had a Hawkman blog. I'm like, well, Hawkman and Marsh Manhunter would go kind of good, too. They both have chest straps. You could probably do something with that. They're both aliens. They're both detectives. But
Chest straps and fishnets.
Yeah, he had twin sons, and he seemed to kind of check out of a lot of stuff related to comic book stuff. So I was like, okay, well, that guy kind of fell by the wayside. And I kept waiting on somebody else to give me a call because I didn't want to have to do the actual work of putting together a podcast. I just wanted to show up and talk a bunch of smack and then go to bed at night instead of having to edit for hours and hours. And nobody ever called.
So
and then
you're third choice.
Right, so basically, we're the last choice.
Yeah.
Well, the thing of it is, it's not that. It's just that it didn't occur to me that y'all guys would ever want to do something like this. I thought that you guys actually had more productive, fulfilling lives than you apparently actually do since you've done this for a long time.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Life is awesome.
So I never really thought that y'all would get into this stuff. Just like you guys never read my blogs or anything because y'all had better things to do than
I
that.
read your blog.
Yeah.
I checked it out once in a while.
Once in a while, yeah. Hey, Mark Wade liked it though. He gave it a big sign of approval and tweeted it out to his followers. He thought it was really cool one day. So
Shout out Mark
yeah.
Wade.
Thanks, Mark Wade.
If you haven't heard of Mark Wade, you can find him at Mark Wade. He writes comic books.
So finally, I was like, well, what if since they had the Firestorm and Aquaman one, what if we did like a Tales of Suspense podcast where I would cover Captain America stories and Mac would cover Iron Man stories, because I figured the odds were better getting Mac on a regular basis to try to do something like that. But then we all went together and we had lunch at this one pretty nice restaurant, if I remember correctly. And I sprang the idea, and Fixit was way more into than Mac. Mac seemed like he was like, almost like, what are you talking about? What is this podcast thing you're talking about? Where Fixit actually listened to podcasts. He was into a lot of Kevin Smith stuff. And so he was like, yeah, podcast. That'd be cool. Let's do a podcast. And so
to be young and dumb and full of
yeah. And so the Tales of Suspense idea kind of fell by the wayside. And, we also, one of the reasons why I wanted to do Tales of Suspense is because I was going to try to get it knocked out before the release of Captain America the Winter Soldier. And then the final deadline was that year's 4th of July. And then once that passed, it's like, okay, well, I guess we won't do a Captain America podcast just yet. And so we did the Annihilation stuff. It's like, well, how do you cover, what do you call an Annihilation podcast? It's like, well, the Marvel superheroes based on the cartoon. So that's how we ended up doing Marvel superheroes. But Fixit, I think, was still expecting us to do something a little bit more rambling and more bullshitty and more
organic.
Organic. And that's how we ended up with doing Rolled Spine, because we would be bullshitting with the mics hot. And it's like, well, this is good material. This is fun. And this, the best stuff Fixit does, because he's more into this than he is a lot of this other shit. That's very planned, very anal.
I can't be restrained, man.
Yeah, you can't restrain this man. You got to jump around. Now, the Rolled Spine name is kind of interesting because, what was the first one? We were trying to find something that was comic, me and Mac were trying to figure out something that was comic related that could translate into podcasting. And we went through a bunch of different options.
So you and I were I think we were even on the same website.
Yeah, where they tell you all kinds of stuff about grading of comics and shit.
Comic
book glossary, a comic book glossary, I think it was.
Right, and all the different, dog-eared corners and all the sun bleed, all the shitty stuff. Mm-hmm. And I skipped over Rolled Spine because I'm going to save it for
later. Wasn't Rolled Spine, it was a spine roll. The term was spine roll. And then I think you came up with Roll Spine, and then I did Rolled Spine.
Something like that.
Something along those lines.
We ended up both being on the same.
Yeah.
My only input was K. Because y'all texted me.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to call it Rolled Spine. I'm like, K.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was my only input.
Just making sure you're cool with that.
Well, because I want to say there was
because what I was doing is I was actually going through Golden Age comic books and looking at their random ass titles, because the comic books in the 40s, they all had goofy, like Captain Billy's Whiz Bang and shit like that. They had goofy ass titles. So I tried a bunch of those, and I tried a bunch of those on Mac, and Mac was kind of lukewarm on that stuff. And then we both ended up on that glossary term page, and once Rolled Spine was in our heads, it's like, okay, well, that's the one, obviously.
Yeah, because I think there were a couple others. I wish I could freaking remember what the some of the other ones were, but I would search them and I'd find them, and I'm like, damn it.
I think Squarebound was something we played with briefly.
Maybe something about maybe direct
edition was the one you liked, and I think there was actually already a direct edition podcast or something. Yeah,
I wanted to do one with maybe Zipatone or something like that, and it just ended up.
Yeah.
We hit a good one.
Yeah, Roll Spine worked.
We got a good one.
Well, it kind of works too because you can imagine you've got that core of the same three guys are doing the podcasts, but they kind of rolls around and goes in different places, and it's not linear like you would expect from a podcast.
And it's backbreaking work to
Yeah,
edit,
no
right,
shit.
keep us on topic.
No fucking kidding. Well, one of these days, though, you guys really got to do some stuff where you just go off and do your own things, too. I kept waiting for Mac to do like a sports one or something, or a car one. I know I talked to...
The problem is that these genres don't cross, and I just know they don't. Sports people do not like cars. Car people do not like sports.
Yeah.
And neither of them like comic books. And comic book people do not like cars, and they do not like sports.
But I think
He's
that
a
might be more
bastard
broad than you
child
think,
of 3
though.
different families.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a renaissance man of shitty hobbies.
Yeah, but you could actually promote your car podcast on your Twitter feed where people are into cars, for
I'm telling
instance.
you, man, it's just, I don't know. Car people are assholes.
And you know, I talked to Curtis from the Odyssey Unleashed podcast, and
Shout out Curtis from
yeah,
Odyssey Unleashed.
Yeah, he was wanting to do some wrestling stuff with you at some point. Talk classic wrestling.
Man, I wish I could. I'm just not versed enough. I wish I was.
But you
more
had your
versed.
period though, where you and your brother and one of our other good
Yeah,
friends
dude.
that I don't know what the hell happened to that guy. Were really into
Yeah,
wrestling.
he probably died.
The one who liked to date girls that spackled on makeup with painter materials. Wasn't he into wrestling too?
Suicide, probably?
No, I don't think he suicided
Oh, come
himself.
on, dude.
I think he just probably
No.
pays a prostitute on the side. Is all.
Probably accidental.
Autoerotic
autoerotic
asphyxiation?
Yes, definitely. He definitely inaccessed himself. he definitely Kane from Kung Fu himself.
That's a whole different kung fu crap.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, I'm not into it. I was into it then. I don't know. I guess I probably could. I could probably guest star.
Well, you could. When it comes to Comicpalooza, the stuff you tend to get the most excited about is the wrestling guys, the old wrestling guys that were hot when you were a fan.
Yeah, like Kevin Nash. When I saw Kevin Nash there, that was pretty cool. Big Papa
Piper
Pump was
was
there.
cool.
Big Papa Pump was cool as shit there. I didn't talk to him, but he was alive, right? It's like seeing a unicorn. I see a wrestler that I saw on TV still alive, and I freak out a bit.
You know, I've never had an interest in standing in line and talking to a celebrity and having them sign my book and all that kind of bullshit. What I like is being close enough to them to see their human flaws and see your basic humanity. Like Sam from True Blood, realizing just how small that guy is. That guy is woman small. He's like a little woman type person. Because Anna Paquin's really tiny, and you don't appreciate just how small he is relative to her. Because when you see him and you're a grown ass man, you're like, holy shit, that guy's tiny.
Ernie Hudson was pretty cool when we saw him at Comic Book.
Yeah. See, here's the thing with Ernie Hudson. I don't know if I've actually seen him at the cons, but the
He was
shit.
at one of them.
That guy's got some fucking troglodyte mentality when it comes to the women's, though.
Really?
The shit he was talking about the girls in the Ghostbusters movie, it's just like, what the fuck, dude? Can't you just let them have this? You had your thing. I know you're one of the original Ghostbusters. You're the guy they got after they gave Eddie Murphy's lines to Bill Murray. And I know this was like your thing. This is like the thing that you had. Nobody knows you from anything else except maybe the cop from The Crow, and I don't think anybody remembers that too well.
Oz.
Oh, well, he had Oz too, but his big thing is Ghostbusters. Everybody saw Ghostbusters, so I understand being protective about it, but don't talk shit about women as the other half of the fucking species. You know, like he that kind of shit, like women aren't funny and that kind of shit. You know, why are they going to put? Yeah, he did shit like that.
Belushi
Like,
thought the same
why would
thing,
you?
so.
Yeah, but John Belushi died almost 40 years ago, so I'm willing to cut him a little bit more slack. It was a simpler time.
Different era.
It's like Mark Twain and the N-word. You know, you just kind of go, okay, well, that was that time period.
I got you.
Although I'm positive John Belushi would still feel the same way today. And he would have been in Ghostbusters with Eddie Murphy, which would have been a fucking awesome movie. I'd have loved to have seen that movie.
No, he would have been Slimer.
Because Ghostbusters is super fucking overrated.
Slimer is actually
John Belushi.
yeah. People don't realize it's side-eye. He's like John Belushi. That was their shout-out to John Belushi. He was Slimer in the Ghostbusters films. And now you know.
Well, if he didn't dig out from the 8 ball, he could have died from all those hot dogs. So
Slimer. Hey,
Did you see the tracks on his arm when he was eating the hot dog?
No, there were no tracks on Slimer's arm. I do not think so. I cannot say definitively, but
I'm pretty sure if
We gotta get the
slow-mo
Blu-ray.
Blu-ray, you're gonna see Slimer got the tracks.
maybe I haven't seen it in Blu-ray, so maybe the details there.
I'm just thinking that all of a sudden all those people being super addicted to Ecto Cooler, I see, makes a lot more sense now.
Shout out Ecto Cooler. Oh, this is a good podcast.
Do they start warming it up on their spoons before?
They do not warm up. They do not tie their arms off with a hose whenever they're warming up their Ecto Cooler.
They're just warming it up a little bit. Well, I need some extra cooler. Oh
Man.
good times, good times.
But Ghostbusters is a super overrated movie, and I wish people would get the fuck over it. And I can't
dude,
wait to see
you
the
hate
extremely
your
funny
youth
women.
so much, dude.
I wasn't.
Oh my god.
Dude, you're like from the age of inception to now, I hate everything between there. It's like every time we come up with something, dude, you hate it.
So yeah.
You think we'll get sued for saying Slimer had tracks on his arms?
No,
No,
I don't think Slimer
Okay,
can
that's just-
lawyer up for.
I just had a
slander.
visual image of like Slimer like leaning on a corner, falling asleep, needle hanging out of his arm. You know.
That's how he fucking died. Actually, wasn't there like some
Excellent
internet?
Slimer impression. I was wondering if you were
Wasn't there some internet
Arnold
meme?
Schwarzenegger and Slimer. Get on the chopper. Oh, no, you're saying Frank?
Oh, wasn't there some internet thing where people were asking how Slimer died? There's like a big thing for a while there.
I can imagine.
I think our view of it's John Belushi's ghost really works.
I think that is the
Dude,
best.
That's
origin
that is
of Slimer.
probably the best way to
Dude,
look at
it's
it. I
gonna
think.
hit. This shit's gonna blow up on Twitter. We just pulled a pin on this grenade and threw it in Twitter. Let's see what happens. I'm not on Twitter, so y'all gotta let me know.
You guys are bumming me out with John Belushi dead. And Slimer.
Well, because Jim lived. That's why you're.
I think John Belushi. No, you're really
the
bumming me
less
out about
funny
Jim Belushi.
Belushi survived. That would be depressing.
Hey, shout
you're-
out Jim Belushi.
You're the one who liked Red Heat. What the fuck?
No, because it was Arnold, dude.
Oh, you liked John?
Yeah. Arnold was
what was
good
that
in that
line
one.
he had in that movie?
Which one?
Red Heat.
Well, okay. Which one was better, K9 or Turner and Hooch?
Oh, definitely Turner. And Hooch.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so he didn't
That
even
was
win
Tom
the
Hanks'
dog
finest,
cop.
dude.
It was
Tom
kind of
Hanks
all
is
downhill
finest.
for Tom Hanks after Turner. and Hooch.
Didn't Jim Belushi did something? I know he had a
Heroin?
sitcom.
He just lived through.
He tried to follow Slimer's trail. Didn't he have a TV show?
He had the TV show. Was that
Wait,
the only
no,
thing
was
he
he
had?
on Reba?
That's some
Hey, didn't he have
seriously
a
random
King of
shit.
Queens? Didn't he
I
on-
told you I watched Trimmers today.
Okay.
Wasn't he on like King of Queens?
No, I don't. He had his own show with
Did he?
Courtney Thorne Smith from Melrose Place because it's
Yes,
totally
no,
realistic.
You're right.
Yeah.
That existed.
Yeah, that existed. Something about like Life with Jim or about Jim or some shit like that. Yeah. But I thought he actually had like at least a movie where he mattered and he was actually like the star where it did something.
Well, I mean,
'Cause I remember him being like shit like About Last Night and stuff. But didn't Jim Belushi ever have anything movie wise that was
he
just
went
his?
the way of Joe. Was it Joe Piscopo? There's a name not many
Hey,
people
Joe
remember.
Piscopo made Dead Heat with Treat Williams. So, damn it.
You throw that name, and I'm going to say about a third of our
Hey,
listeners
wait.
will
This,
be like,
this was
Well, you
about
know
the
what's
Marvel
funny?
Superhero podcast.
Yeah, but it's trust me, it's gone off the rails. I think it's going to end up on a rolled spine.
Shit.
Although I might collect the Secret Origin stuff because I don't think that's cool enough for rolled spine. So fuck. Oh yeah, did y'all ever see Joe Piscopo? That's the funny thing is because Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy saved Saturday Night Live. They were
Yeah.
easily the co-stars of the show at a time when they had stars, as opposed to the original cast where everybody was so good that you couldn't just say this guy was the star, except for Chevy Chase. And since he left after that first season, they got the star notion out of the way. Where when they were on the show, they were the stars. They were the funniest people on the show easily. And Eddie Murphy goes on to this stellar movie career, and Joe Piscopo just fucking crashes and burns. How the fuck does that play with your
well,
mind?
dude, whenever you do a skit of Stevie Wonder and Frank Sinatra,
Right.
yeah, you're not going to make it.
I am black and you are white.
What was that?
I can. You're
I
blind
can
as a
see-
bat, and
yeah.
I've got sight. Yeah.
All I remember from Joe Piscopo is that he was like a staple on Hollywood Squares.
Because he had no fucking career.
Right.
And it's funny because he was actually pretty funny on Saturday Night Live. I hear he's a enormous asshole.
Yeah, I
just
heard
think-
that too.
Yeah.
That may actually. Well, but so does Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, but Eddie Murphy continued to be funny where Piscopo couldn't translate that to film.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't understand what did Eddie Murphy have that he didn't. Eddie Murphy was cool, right?
Yeah, that was part. Well, but Eddie Murphy was funnier than Piscopo.
Sure.
And he had
Joe
better. And he
Piscopo
had
was
more
not cool.
characters too. That
Joe,
didn't hurt.
and he got all like freaking roided out.
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
He went like carrot top roids, like
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
Huge.
I think he was taking out his frustration on his body.
Carrot Top is scary as shit, dude. I saw
That dude is fucking
We are
creepy.
not taking this podcast care. I can see the path that's starting to go down. I'm going to reel this shit back in. So
We're going
hey,
down
guys.
the rabbit hole.
You're going to reel the roll?
Wait, did you take the blue pill or the red pill?
Hey guys, good.
Clearly the red pill, because ginger.
Hey guys, what I'm saying is pat yourself on the back. Good year of podcasting. Oh, wait, no, shit. I forgot to. So, like, we interviewed Peter David and an artist to be named later.
Actually,
well, this will probably be after.
he's
right?
he's going to turn up on the Captain America episode a little bit, just a little bit.
DeMatteis.
D.
fireworks.
Matisse.
It's D. Matisse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the part I'm actually having trouble with, if you can believe that. It's the first two letters. I can't remember if it's Day or D.
It's D.
But the Matisse I definitely have down because we said it back and forth enough times, and it's Matisse, the artist.
D. Matisse.
D.
So,
Matisse.
yeah, and it was unbelievable because, okay. Well,
And his interview is way better than Peter David one, by the
we're
way.
going to do a little
I just
comic
have to
book.
say.
Oh, yeah, it was well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's never great the first time, buddy. It's shorter than you would have liked. And
Well,
you paid too
actually-
much for it.
I still think Peter wanted us to hang out with us, man. When he was telling us the rest of his schedule.
Well, no,
Yeah,
but
he was like, guys,
okay.
I'm gonna be at Barnes
I'm
and Noble later, and no one's
going to
show.
be there.
Yeah.
I'm
Please
like,
come.
I'm thinking Peter wants us to hang. Like we could be his posse. We
He
can
wants
hang
us
with
to,
Peter.
Peter's
wants to bring
posse.
some Lone Star and tamales and really find out about Houston, man.
Dude, we could have been rolling with Peter, man. That would have been a fun podcast.
So yeah, we didn't talk. I wanted to put a little talk about Comicpalooza before one of these interviews.
Okay, well, actually, Ange specifically wanted us to talk about Comicpalooza.
Yeah. So, what did you guys think of Comicpalooza this year? This will be quick, short, and sweet, pretty easy. Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. Frank appears to be getting a little burned out with Comicpalooza.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that. Here's the thing. I've got bills I need to pay. I went to school for a few years there. I ran up some tolls there. So it's hard for me to go to a comic convention and spend a bunch of money on art commissions and stuff. And that's the main thing I do at comic conventions. It's the thing that kept me interested for a while. And also,
Hey, which by the way, side plug, check out the website, Idlehead of Diabolu, where he posts a lot of these commissions. And he gets these freaking artists, who some are no name, some are very much name, to draw some of the most obscure fucking characters from Martian Manhunter lore. You'll be like, this character looks ridiculous. And then you'll see who drew it. And we're like, wow. Frank actually had to hand this human being a reference of a squirrel in a fucking trench
a
coat.
man in a squirrel suit who
In-
robs.
Which I still think is
who's
one of the
robbers.
best
It's
That's
one of the
awesome.
best
Yeah,
ones.
Chris
They're great.
Beaver.
Yeah, so it's great because he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to get a so-and-so to draw this. Really? What are you going to get him to draw? A fucking squirrel.
Well, no, but
Hey,
it's
I'm
great
gonna go commission Ethan Van Sciver. Oh, dope! You gonna get him to draw Martian Manhunter? Nope, Zook.
His little intimidating imp.
And I'm like, you're gonna pay how much? And you're this much. Oh,
Well, no, that was only $40.
well, it doesn't.
No, but
it
the
doesn't
cool
matter.
stuff is though you give the artists the license
only
to do
40
whatever
bucks.
they want.
No, I don't give them the license to do whatever they want. I want them to do the fucking character, but
Is their interpretation?
yes, their interpretation, and I still believe. Do I want to draw Batman for the 150,000th time, or do I want to draw Mr. Moth? Personally, I'd want to draw Mr. Moth if I were an artist. I'd want to do something completely different. And there's an enthusiasm that comes with that because, like, hey, I get to really do something nifty here.
And you
something
do.
different.
I mean, we've been with you. You go to pick up your pieces, and while the artist is drawing it, and you can tell they're generally enthusiastic about drawing something they've never drawn before.
Yeah.
Because literally, they're like, what? Where's this character from? What? And you're
Right.
having to educate them, which is pretty cool.
But see, the thing of it is, now that Comicpalooza has been out for several years, there's a lot of the same artists showing up year after year. And so the shtick, I think, starts to wear out for a while for them. And, you know, sometimes the pieces are great, sometimes they're not so great. And so after a not so great one, you're not as interested in going and get another piece. But this year, what it was is I just don't have a lot of money. And there's a bunch of conventions this year. And I was really interested in getting these interviews done and trying to screw up the nerve to start interviewing people, which is not something I've ever thought I would end up doing. Also, there was one or two artists that kind of threw a little attitude at me, like I'm not coming up and spending money with them. So, you know, I'm the bad guy. I'm not helping to support their table this year. And so that really turned me off. Also, this year's Comicpalooza, a lot of the guys that got were people that either don't do pieces at all, or they were going to charge me exorbitant amounts of money for an extremely dicey piece. And I didn't feel like doing that. And I'm just tired of all the running around and stuff. I actually kind of want to do some more smaller shows. There's a couple of smaller ones coming to town with some artists that are not people who've been in Houston often or lately. And I just wanted to do something different. But also, I just wanted to actually enjoy the con for once because, every year that I've gone since that first year, it's been like with a heavy agenda where I'm gotta go, I gotta get this piece from this guy, and it was so tense. And this year I just walked around and I looked at cosplayers and I bought comic books and shit. And it's like, I just got to enjoy it as an actual convention for a change.
How about you there, Mr. Fixit? You go every year, multiple days. What's up, man?
Yeah, I think we'll come back on the multiple days.
Oh, yeah, too much.
Yeah, you can. 2 days, I think, is pretty solid for it.
Yeah.
Anything more than that,
Even as big as that show's gotten, that 2 days is probably enough to get the good stuff out of it.
Well, they just it's it almost feels like an arts and crafts show now to me. Like there's either people selling their art or selling their crafts, which is cool. But there's, I mean, I say hi to the celebrities. I don't pay for autographs. I'll go and shake their hands and tell them how much I enjoy their work. The cosplayers will do their thing, and then we might go check out a couple of a couple of the conferences.
Oh, the panels.
The panels.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And I mean, a good Friday and Saturday, you're pretty much done. To drag it out 2 more days, I mean, I tried to do all 4 days, and I think one day, Monday, I just went there for like an hour. I was bored.
Yeah, I skipped Monday entirely.
Yeah,
so
it's fun, but definitely too much fun.
Yeah, with me, since I'm getting the commissions, it takes time for somebody to draw a piece and to juggle your piece versus everybody else's piece. So
But
sometimes
you got to stay on them. You got to kind of
sometimes. Well, no. I mean, so that's the thing. Is it depends on the artist. Some artists are fucking absolute pros. They do something really cool, and they do it quick, and it's awesome. And there's some guys that you got to give them the time. And sometimes it'll take months. Sometimes I've had to do stuff where I've dealt with mail order or I catch them at the next convention to actually pick up the piece, and it's absolutely fucking worth the wait. And then there's that one son of a bitch that ripped off my girlfriend who 3 years later still hasn't produced a piece of artwork for us, that we need to all go up and like intimidate him by being, big nasty looking guys. So it just depends on the artist. Some of the guys are great. Some of the guys are not so great. The guys that get pieces from over and over again, there's a reason for that. I like their work, or I like the price, or something that's getting me to come back to them over and over again. So nobody should take personal offense if I don't catch them in a particular year. But it did bother me that it's like, I've been buying art from you from like every year, sometimes multiple pieces of artwork in a given year, and then the one year where I just don't have the money and I'm going to throw shade at me. It bothers me.
Hey,
Did that happen to you this year?
Yeah.
Hey, don't throw shade at Frank, please.
Yeah,
No,
I'm not a bad guy. I'm pretty enthusiastic. I pay cash money in advance. Don't
Yeah, you're
could you
very
not give me-
accommodating too.
You'll have to tell me who it was later, man. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Here's what I think about Comicpalooza. I fucking hate cosplay, and I'm over it. And
Yeah.
I want it to stop. All it does is it reminds me of so I was an art student before I went into my current profession, and it reminds me of hanging around all the halls around the art building and all these stupid drama kids that drive me insane, that were overly eccentric, and were never going to become actors. And you know what they do now? They do cosplay. And most of their outfits are terrible, and all cosplay is made up of 49.999% Jokers and 49.99999% Deadpools, and variants of those two, and then you got a few like anime people sprinkled.
You have to
And some
incorporate Harley
Stormtroopers.
Quinn into the Joker area because
And
there's
you got
a
a couple
ton of Harley Quinns.
Stormtroopers, and that's it. And then like we were walking around, and I'm seeing like groups of drama kids who are like putting on skits in front, and I'm just like, this is just dumb shit. Like, you're not even here buying anything. You bought a ticket to try and put on a show for people. And again, I guess that gets, but to me, like, I could take a day of that. I cannot take more, and I have to have you guys there for support as I make fun of them, because
And he does.
You need somebody to listen to the jokes.
yeah, you got to listen to me. Otherwise, I'd just be a crazy person walking around just getting into fights probably. But I can't stand it. And then, we go upstairs and there's like a live Celtic band where they're singing like they're doing Lord of the Ring soundtrack covers and shit. And I'm just like, I can't handle that either. And then we turn around and there's like extreme midget wrestling over here. And it's too much for me. And you know what? There's not enough comic books.
Yeah, well,
Which I find frustrating. And then
there's a lot of fucking comic books though. You can't say there's no comic books. There's a lot of square footage comics.
that one table that they're doing like package deals of like runs.
Oh well, that guy's an asshole,
dude. That was insane. When I'm like, dude, you can go buy the trade with all these books for like $20.
Yeah,
you ask for like $75.
Or
that
5
guy-
years of Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what the fuck?
But somebody, okay, that guy's obviously a big asshole. But either somebody's paying for that shit, or he's using his convention appearances to launder drug money, which I've heard happen. It's like, that's a good way. It's like, you're not going to make any money. You keep all your props because you've got everything overpriced and you're laundering drug money. There was actually back in the 90s, there was a guy here in town that got busted for doing that shit. But in his case, he was great. He had great deals. He sold comic books that were worth way more money than what he was charging for them, and without any care in the world. He was awesome because he had all that drug money and he was using the cons to cover for the money he was
But
selling.
I don't want to rip on the. There are some legitimate cosplay that show up to these shows.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
You tell
no,
them,
I absolutely like the cosplay. The only time I don't like the cosplay cosplay is when they're physically in the frickin' way, which happens too
Right.
often, where they fucking will just, there'll be a
clog-
sea of them and you can't get past them.
They clog up the whole aisle to put on some stupid skit, and but everybody's like, "Oh my god, look at those cosplayers! They're putting on a skit," and they all stand around, and I'm like, "I'm just trying to get to look at some fucking t-shirts, man.
Right.
Well, no,
Get out
the
of my
one-
way so I can buy some."
And the damn parade they have, I hate that.
Well, no,
damn thing.
dude, some of them
parade.
are cool. I mean, I got to meet Doom Kitty, which I think
No, but that's what we're saying. That's what we're
she
trying
was
to
a
say.
great. She was really cool to talk to real quick, and
Individual cosplayers, individual costumes, I think are cool. It's when you get a mass of them. And there's a whole bunch of them. They
And you
all
can tell they're
suck,
just
and they're getting in the way, and they're attention whoring.
And they're Party City hacks. They're going, they're
Yeah.
just buying some Party City costumes
Yeah.
and chopping them up and throwing some face paint on. I
well,
can't
no,
stand
the
it.
one
Get
thing I
fuck
thought
out of
was
my
strange
face.
is that there were so many
and the
liquor stands all over Comicpalooza. Like that, I thought was kind of strange
What?
to me.
Yeah, all those little liquor stands they've got now.
Oh, well, yeah.
It just pisses me off because
Yeah,
they
it's
close those down at like 7:00. And that, like last year, I tried to go to a drunk trivia challenge deal, and they closed the bar immediately as it was starting. So unless you were drunk coming in, you couldn't get drunk over the course of the trivia challenge.
Yeah,
so that was like
hey,
kind of defeated the purpose as far
Next
as I was
year we need
concerned.
to just Uber it.
Oh,
we
yeah?
need to Uber in, hit up a bar afterwards.
Yeah.
Let torch.
Go to that Neil's place.
Yeah, Neil's Bar.
Neil's Bar, and then we
big shout out to Neil's Bar. Great bar.
Hey, if you guys ever in Houston, go to Neil's Bar. It's basically a nerd bar. They show
Yeah,
Best one in
it's all
town.
video games, and,
Yeah,
and it's
love that
near
place.
to George R. Brown.
That one or
Convention Center.
Joystick.
Trade-
Joystick
they have-
is a good one.
They have trades everywhere you can pick up and read while you're drinking and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, me and Mac went
Karaoke,
there. Me
as
and
I
Mac
understand
went
it.
there a couple weeks ago.
So let's just get
Very good time.
torched. Let's go get torched and then just Uber it home.
That would be cool. That would be good. That'd be
Uber it
good.
like the kids do. Anyway, so I don't want to trash all of Comicpalooza. Like I said, there is some interesting stuff there that's good, but that was something that really gets on my nerves.
George R. Brown is so big, and they keep taking up
Huge.
more and more of the. I mean, it's a city block essentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is.
Well,
Yeah.
it's more than
It's more than a city block.
Is
It's
it?
like yeah.
To walk from
Well,
one
and
end
it-
of George R. Brown to the other, it's like 3 or 4 city blocks.
And then of course
And they don't
use-
take up the
and they do-
entire thing.
And the width
Well, no, they
too.
do
I mean,
two
it's like
floors. They took 2 or 3
the
floors.
width
just-
is probably 1 city block.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and in multiple stories. So
The
they
girth.
have so much space that as much as I don't care to walk past like all the science experiments and astronaut stuff, there are people who are into that, and that's their space.
Yeah.
And I just don't have to walk over that far end of the show. I can just stop and not walk over there. So there's no sense about taking offense at something that I'm not interested in taking in space when there's so much stuff that I am interested in that I can get to. The only thing I do wish is that they would space out some of the stuff more, put some comic stands over near the astronauts so that everybody isn't concentrated into one area if you're trying to look through like back issue bins and stuff. That would be kind of nice.
So I just want to say,
Diversify the layout more, I think.
I want to end it with this. So Frank, I meet Frank there, and he'd kind of mentioned this in the past, but I thought he was full of less shit. And he goes, "Hey, I bought a mixer. I'm going to interview Peter David." And I said, "No, you're not. Put that shit back in your car. We're going to get thrown out. Please don't." He's like, No. Think about it. Artists, you're commissioning their time, so writers sit here and they just bullshit with people for free. Well, that's what they do for a living. They write, they converse, So he goes, "I don't know why I couldn't just commission some of their time." And I said, "You're going to get us thrown out. Please don't do this. I can't be near you while you're doing this." And then I nearly had a panic attack and fell down on the ground.
Once we actually got over to Peter David, you mean?
Oh, right, because we're like standing behind one of these big pillars that support the roof for George R. Brown Convention Center, and we're like checking levels, and I feel like we're doing something illegal, and we're plugging it in, and everything's working. And then he's like, "Okay, well, I think I'm going to walk over there now." And I was like, "Please don't do this. Please reconsider this." And then he walked over, and obviously you grease the wheels a little bit with some. I think
Well, they have fantastic negotiating skills, man.
unbelievable negotiating skills. But Peter David was like, "Shit, wait a second. You're going to pay me to sit here and talk? All I got to do is answer questions I've probably answered a million times. Pull up a chair, right?" Like
Right.
he was like,
he
"Pull up a-
literally let me pull up a chair. That was
He's like,
awesome of
"Pull
him.
up a chair." He goes, "If you don't mind me break whenever people want to come over so I can sign some stuff, that's fine." And you're like, "Dude, go ahead." And you were being a very, very accommodating. I think
Yeah, because it's their con too. I'm not buying a table or some shit. It's not my space, and these guys should be able to walk up and say, "Hey," and some of that's cool. You know what happened too? And I've got it recorded while we were interviewing Peter David. Barry Bostwick of Spin City and Rocky Horror Picture fame showed up. I'd gone to the panel where he was at, fucking around with his co-stars Nell Campbell and Patricia O'Quinn.
that was JM that happened.
No, that was Peter David. Because Peter David's wife
took a picture. Yeah, his wife took a picture.
No, Peter David's wife owns a pair of Barry Bostwick's underwear that he had signed related to Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I ended up chatting with Barry Bostwick for a minute there, just, nothing significant, but he's just like, hey, how you doing? The kind of stuff. And I was like, hey, I enjoyed the show. He's like, oh yeah, that's cool and stuff. Hey, it was just neat just to hang out and like, hey, I'm bullshitting with Barry Bostwick. All right. That's worth the money alone. There are people who are paying money to be able to go and walk up and do that. And I just had it happen because I'm sitting by some dude.
I would say that being there, and you guys listen to the podcast, and you'll listen to our J.M. DeMatteis's podcast, and you'll hear that these guys are genuinely enthusiastic because, like his artist commissions, Home Dude's asking questions that these guys don't ever answer. Whenever Peter David gets in front of one of these panels, he's on freaking just auto dial. Like, he's just repeating the same answers to the same questions over and over and over again. Whereas you can tell you were asking questions, and he's all like, oh, shit, nobody ever asked me if I'd done why didn't I take over after Giffen left
Justice League
International, right?
Yeah.
I would have been the perfect person, and I have.
He would have been. It would have been great because the guy who took over was Dan Jurgens, who had contempt for the characters that were on the team, who could not write comedy to save his life. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to diminish Dan Jurgens. I think he's a good writer, great artist for straight superhero stuff, but you don't have him follow Giffen and DeMatteis on frickin' Justice League International. It was horrible, and it was the start of a long hated run that canceled the book.
Right. So because
not his specific run, but like he started a series of people who had no business writing that book, writing and drawing the book until it crashed and burned and had to be revived by Grant Morrison and Howard Porter.
It started the great theme of that interview where he would go, "That's an excellent question." No, and you can tell like some of those questions where he was, or when you asked him what was the Aquaman run he did.
Atlantis Chronicles.
Atlantis Chronicles. He got fired up for that.
He loves that book, and they never have collected it. They've never treated it correctly.
Yeah, he brought that up too.
I guarantee you, he never gets asked about that in these stupid panels. But as soon as you brought it up, he was like, "Oh yeah, let me tell you about Atlantis Chronicles. I was at a party, and so tells me that they're going to treat this like Watchmen." And like I was like, "Oh shit!"
I think it was Giordano or Levitz and definitely Jeanette Kahn.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I'm like, Peter David is getting fired up about this shit. And then it was the same with JM. Like he was taken back with
the thing with his is I could interview either one of those guys for hours, but I had not done the prep work for Peter David. I knew that it was going to be a shorter, quicker interview and more focused. So that's one of the reasons why I went with him first, because I knew doing the DeMatteis was going to be harder because I had a lot of material I needed to ask about. But I was still only researching like his Defenders run and his Justice League stuff, and that's pretty much all we were talking about. But it got, because the questions were in depth and he was having to give more in-depth answers, I thought he was much more engaged than he would have been with the same thing. Because he had like the boilerplate answers. I saw him at a panel where people would ask him, well, what was it like writing Dr. Fate? And you could hear, even though he was enthusiastic about the book, because he's great. He's great
awesome.
Speaker. But you could tell that he was also somewhat of a canned answer, because you could see he was just rattling it off without even really having to think about what he was saying, because he had answered that question so many times. But then I'd come at him and ask him, about Satanism, and he's like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? He's kind of, I can see a little bit of concern in his eyes
like,
when I first brought that up.
What did I do?
And then it went somewhere. He's like, oh, good. No, this guy isn't crazy. He's just asking me deep shit. And he got into it. So that was awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
Like
so I got to listen to that one.
We talked to him. Well, okay, and we'll talk about why you haven't heard that one. So it was because at the end of that hour, I still felt like he was ready to keep talking, and I almost felt, like, man, is there a way I can like nudge Frank? I feel like we should wrap this up, just because I feel like this is going to go on forever, because JM just keeps talking. Like, he was so engaged in it, and he had a great time. Afterwards he was like, thank you very much. This was terrific. It was, the pleasure was mine. He was really happy about it. And the reason Fixit didn't hear any of it was because he just walked away.
Dude, I went to go do some convention stuff.
You just walked away.
I didn't know y'all were going right away, because I remember there was like all these breaks between people. No, I didn't.
It was I think you literally said, I'm going to walk right over here. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
And we didn't see you for 2 hours, dude. Like, you were gone, dude. It was unbelievable that how you had just vanished. And I just kept telling Frank, he just walked away. We didn't know where you were. It was unbelievable. It was damn near impressive.
Damn near.
The callousness was superhuman.
You knew we were putting on that. We were talking to a creator. I'm holding a mixer. Frank's recording stuff, and you're just like, this is awesome, man. You were there for the whole time with Peter David, and then you were just fucking gone, dude. Like, just into the ether. You just vanished into thin air. And it was I couldn't believe
like the devil.
Well, here's my question. Does J. Mark DeMatteis actually mean anything to you? Does that name mean anything to
dude,
you?
What
have you read of his stuff? Okay, wait a second. Yeah, I know that name. I think I know some of his stuff, and then you immediately go, what did I read?
Well, I'm trying to remember.
Then he doesn't mean anything to you.
No, I'm trying to remember. He's written
Because I personally think he's one of the greatest comic book writers
Spectre.
ever.
I wanted to read his Spectre stuff.
I don't think he ever wrote the Spectre. I think you're thinking of John Ostrander.
You're thinking of Dr.
Oh,
Fate?
probably.
Yeah.
No, was it Dr. Fate?
Oh, I love J. Mark's run on Suicide Squad. Fucker.
No, I've seen it. I've seen it.
Was that right after the Bendis
I'm not a
run?
huge fan.
Right after Bendis, but before Jonathan Hickman.
Oh,
I'm not a huge
right after
fan of
the
his.
Hickman run.
I actually think I do have the collection or his run of the JLA International. Fryho gave them to me.
Hey, Mac, what do you think of Kraven's Last Hunt?
Kraven's Last Hunt's for
Fucker.
shit.
You remember that one, fucker?
See, look at that. He's getting hood.
He is. He's getting
getting
about his hood
fucker.
as this young man.
Don't try to get hood on me, man. Ain't gonna win.
Anyway.
You ain't gonna win in the end.
So I
Seriously, though, didn't you like at least Kraven's Last
No,
Hunt?
dude. I know the guy,
Death
but
of
I'm
Gene
not.
DeWolf, right?
I'm not a.
He did-
I'm-
No, that was Peter David.
Peter, I'm getting him mixed up.
Dude,
Calm down.
like,
That's right.
There's certain writers. Okay, there's certain writers I follow religiously. Then there's other writers I'll see it like Keith Giffen.
Good save.
It's kind of hit and miss. Like some stuff
Oh,
will
no,
write.
Keith Giffen is super fucking hit and miss.
Yeah, there's
some
certain
of my
stuff-
favorite comics ever were by him, and some comics I fucking loathe
Yeah,
were
so
by him.
and then Jay DeMatteis, like they're one of those where I'll see it and I'll look. There's some writers I will buy the book because of the writer. I don't care who it is about. I'll read it because I'm basing it on the writer. There's some I'll look at the writer. I'm like, he's a decent writer. What's the comic book about? And if it's something I'm interested, I'll pick it up. There's the best example is Akuda. What's his name? Acuna. He did Major Bummer.
Oh, John Arcudi.
Yeah, Cootie. Like him. It's a hit and miss. There's stuff
I've got a trade of his in that stack,
Really?
by the way.
So
yeah.
there's certain guys I will read, but I have to look at the characters they're writing for.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they just don't work. Like, I liked his Major Bummer stuff, but I didn't like his Gene 13 stuff.
Yeah, well,
So-
Gary Frank was not a good pick for that either. I love Gary Frank, and I still wouldn't follow Gen 13 because he had no business drawing that book. It was the
It was
completely
kind of weird style for him. It was
No, well, because it's a cheesecake book, and it works when you've got someone like J. Scott Campbell who's doing this kind of cutesy, cartoony,
So back to-
sexualized stuff, and then Gary Frank comes there and does this super realistic stuff, and Arcudi's trying to do it as a drama, and it's like, that is not what anybody signed
I
on to
love
this
Gary
fucking
Frank.
book for.
Gary Frank
is fucking
Yeah.
awesome.
I'll
But that doesn't
flip
mean
through
he's
everything.
great on anything, though, just anything. It's maybe great drawings, but
Maybe
that
it
doesn't
doesn't
mean
work
he's
for the
right on the book.
storytelling.
so like I said, Jay DeMatteis is like that for me. I have to see something.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to
Like-
bust. I mean, I'm busting your balls a little bit,
Well, like
but
the
mostly,
Spider-Man, no, like Kraven's Last Hunt's fucking. I think one of the best old school Spider-Man stories out there.
Nice
I mean,
qualifier. But no, the point is this isn't a guy who resonates with you, and that's why you
No.
didn't hang out, and that's cool. That's fine.
Well, dude, I told you I was starstruck when I met Peter David. Like,
Yeah, I know.
I never
Yeah.
get starstruck, and I met him, and I was like,
because he's one of your favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've met him and George Perez, so you know.
Well, honestly, as much as I was fucking with you, the main point was that Mac couldn't understand why you'd walk away, and I totally understand because you don't connect to that guy the
Yeah.
way you did with Peter David.
Well,
You're
no,
going to sit
but-
there and listen to us talk
no.
with Peter David, where the other guy is not going to mean as much to you. Whereas for me, it's like
Well, I'd already-
as much as I love Peter David, and I love Peter David's work, and I definitely could have talked with him for hours and hours more. But I mean, part of the reason why I focus so much on DeMatteis and why I had so many questions for him, besides the fact that he was relevant to stuff we're doing with the podcast, but also because I've read so much of his stuff and so much of his work has meant so much to me. I mean, I didn't even get around to talking about to him about Captain America. And thankfully he brought it up and I got some use out of that. But, I mean, I wasn't even prepared to do the research I needed to do for his Captain America run because so many of his runs have been so meaningful to me. He, for me, was like Peter David was for you.
Well, I mean, I told you I met Peter David on Friday, and we got that really cool his driver's license story,
Yeah.
which I just thought was cool as shit. I mean, he told us this great story. He's joking around, and me and Fryho were just sitting there and, you know, just kind of hanging out with him, take some pictures with him, and he was just really
well,
cool.
the time we recorded that, we blew it off and destroyed that recording. So you might want to tell the story right quick because we didn't keep that.
Sure. So we went to Peter David's table, and they were asking him if he wanted a blown up picture of himself behind him, so people knew who he was. And he says, most times people who know me will come up to me. People who don't, that's fine. I'm fine with that. And they're like, "But would you like a picture?" And he goes, "Well, the only picture I'll use is in my wallet." He pulls out a driver's license, and it's a picture of him doing this surprise look where he's like, his mouth's open, he has this gaspy look. And people are like, "How did you get away with that?" So he tells us the story of how he took the picture pre 9/11. He said he went to the DMV. They said, "Okay, stand up for your picture." He did that crazy pose. They said, "You can't stand like that." Okay. He got this. They did the crazy pose. They're like, "We can't take that picture." He says, "Okay." He did the crazy pose, and they're like, "Fuck it." Okay, fine. They take the picture. So all he does is he renews that same driver's license every year to keep that picture. And but he, like he said, you'll never find that on anyone else's license because you can't get away with that nowadays. Because he was telling us how he's gone to airports, and because of that, they think it's a fake. So they kind of interrogate him a little bit more to make sure what's going on, because that's not a picture you usually see. They can't use it for face
right,
recognition and stuff like that.
Contorted, so it doesn't work.
And so it was just a really cool, quick story that he told us. And I mean, he was just really laid back. He, just sat there and bullshitted the whole time. So
yeah, and that was something that I was surprised that like I said, Peter David, he's kind of a big deal for.
Oh yeah,
but. He was just super cool, man. Like, George Perez was super cool.
Yeah, he's a real good guy.
Jim Steranko was super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We loved, because I was prepared. I kind of thought he was going to be like a blowhard or something.
Yeah, so did I. I thought he was going to be a dick.
Cool.
Dude, the cool magic trick. He was doing magic for us. I was like, wow, this guy's really.
That's a suave motherfucker too. I don't know how old he is now, but that dude's still. Obviously, the clothes are updated, but they're still freaking cool. It's like he's not trying to be a 20-year-old. He's cool from his era. And he's still like, granny panties got to be getting thrown at that guy. I'm telling you.
So I just wanted to, Jesus.
It's like dust.
He's like the Tom Jones of comic books.
Stop! Don't say that.
Not when they're dusty.
They're dusty. You got to add water to rehydrate. No, so I just wanted to say, for all of some of the things that's
what's that Vagilive stuff that the old ladies use to like free lube?
Stop. We're gonna have to end the podcast. So as much of the stuff like super annoyed me about Comicpalooza, dude, you stepping up and going and interviewing people blew my mind. And the fact that they were like really cool with it, I was like, this is freaking badass. But so I look forward to next year for if some different creators come trying that again.
Oh, I'm gonna hit some of these guys up in the upcoming times.
And I look forward to us eventually getting shot down, and because we've had so many good experiences, we are going to fucking destroy the creator.
The guy who fucks it.
Oh, God,
but see, the thing is,
destroy you.
I told you, I saw other people there doing the same thing. I saw maybe one or two.
Oh, no, I've
but
seen
not
guys
at the
do
degree
it.
of you had. Like they had the little tape recorder
or the bullshit iPhone maps.
Hey, look, we got a Frank. It's just like Avengers. We've got a Frank instead of Hulk. That line in the Avengers is a movie that came out.
Yeah.
He says we've got a Hulk.
Vaguely remember.
Okay, but we got Frank. They got Franked. Oh, remember you franked Peter David at one point? Remember that?
I'm not sure.
There were several times where he franked Peter David.
Oh,
you had corrected.
Did you frank him hard?
Remember?
Don't talk shit about Peter.
Did you look at him? You're like, look me in the eyes while I frank you.
I'm not talking shit.
Look me in the eyes while I frank you.
He is. Yeah, I know what you're saying. This one's making it wrong.
Like, I don't know. It was 30 years ago, and you're just like, no, but don't you remember when? And he would be like, no, and you're like, okay.
Oh, I do remember one of those. You're right. I do remember where he's like, what did he say? You basically caught him off guard.
I think it was a secret origin story.
Far back, he's like, I can't even remember that or something along the line. Yeah, you franked him. It's all right, man.
I was proud. I was proud of you for several reasons. I was proud of you. You're a very nice young man.
It's nice to see someone else get franked once in a while, because when you get franked after a while, man, you're just like, I want to see someone else get franked.
And with that, listen to the interview of J.M. DeMatteis.
Oh yeah, like that's going to be the prelude. Sure it is.
Well, this will probably be the stinger for that, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. This won't even be in the same fucking stream. Are you kidding me?
No, please don't start a different stream for this. God damn it.
No, this is going to be on our old spine. Because we're
bullshit talking stream.
No, this would be
this is like a whole other episode of Rolled Spine at this point.
We're definitely getting another stream to contain us
other
talking about other streams.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Well, I got to head out.
You cunt.
Dude, it's 9:30, fool.
It's 9:30 on a Saturday of a holiday weekend.
It's 9:30 on a Saturday on a holiday week.
You can't pick up ice cream. It's a holiday weekend.
Yeah, there's nothing going to be fucking open. Huh? You're not going to get any ice cream today.
Nothing because it's the white man's Christmas. So what are we going to do?
On 4th of July to boot.
Together one day every 3 months.
Yeah, and he's like, sorry guys, I got a barrel.
Every other week. But it's always y'all are like, well.
Yeah, no, we want to do it all in one day instead of having to commit to weekend after weekend of recording sessions and shit. Okay, we're the bad guys here. Okay, now you can, real quick, the Amazing Heroes episode that we've done so far, the interview with Peter David, we received retweets from Adam Blackmoon, Ange, Count Druncula, Eternal Rage, Firestorm Fan, and Keith G. Baker, as well as favorites from Adam Blackmoon, Ange, Count Druncula, Eternal Rage, and Jackie Earl Haley, the actor perhaps best known at this point for playing Rorschach in Watchmen, or you might have been a fan of him as a kid in Bad News Bears. I really liked him in the movie Little Children. But he's done a lot of great stuff, and he's directed a film that I don't know if it had a debut or I think it was just a showing at Houston's Comicpalooza, and him and some of his actors, including the fellow who played Darwin in X-Men First Class, they flew in just to show the movie, and that was the only way you could see them. And I didn't get the chance to catch that because I was working that Friday and I was probably passed out by the time they were going to show their movie. But that was really cool. I appreciated that.
I hope he favorited it because he actually listened to it. That'd be badass.
Yeah, that would be cool. And we got a +1 on that episode from Luke Dobb as well.
My man Luke Dobb.
And as far as comments on the episode, Ange wrote, as I was listening to the podcast, I kept hoping Frank would ask one question about Supergirl. No worries, enjoyable all around. And the truth is, I just didn't, I spent the majority of my time preparing for a follow-up interview with another creator. And I definitely wanted to talk to Peter David, and we got a great interview out of him. I love talking with him. I ran out of time to prep for that interview as much as I would have liked to, or I would have surely gotten around to Supergirl, because I very much enjoyed that run. Martin Gray wrote, that was a blast. I never heard Peter David speak. He sounds great company. He was. The man is such a talented writer. I'm only sad you didn't have time to get to his Supergirl work. Sounds familiar. Still plenty of meat, and I really appreciate the annotations. Yeah, I thought that was handy. I would hope that worked out for folks. That Atlantis Chronicles Meteor story was a hoot. But basically, I do enjoy Peter's writing. I wish he'd go back to DC and go bonkers. I think he would go bonkers if he was stuck at DC. He's probably going bonkers at Marvel, and he probably needs a whole other company besides the two of them.
Yeah.
Eric Larson wrote, Eric Larson of Savage Dragon and Amazing Spider-Man and Spider-Man fame, and a brief stint on Aquaman that was seen somewhat as revenge against Peter David, given their long-term animosity towards each other. Amazing. After all these years, people still feel compelled to talk to him about something he didn't do. Whereas I thought, hey, I don't think anybody's asked him about that. I've never read that in an interview, and I was just really curious to see. And I think he mostly had positive stuff to say about Image, not the early years, but these guys didn't know what the heck they were doing in those early years, so they kind of deserved it, I thought.
Yeah,
I think Image has proven itself to be a great company in the long run. But I was just interested in considering what an early critic he was, how he feels about the company 25 years later or whatever it is.
Yeah, on our Underguides podcast, it deals more like independent comics. I think that we're very complimentary of Image Comics.
Oh, yes.
They've grown into.
They're my favorite company right now. I buy more Image Comics than anything else right now. Except for those 2 months I bought all those Convergence books.
But hey, it's fascinating. In the time, that was kind of a big deal. Peter David and Image was a big deal.
Yeah. Google Plus follows we got from Colin Wybe and Track Tour Music Library. So hey, thanks guys. I don't know if Google Plus is a thing that people really do anymore, but it's a vestigial element of our blogs, so we're happy folks are getting some use out of that.
So shout out Google.
We don't do a lot with it, but I pay enough attention to know when somebody follows us, and we auto post Marvel stuff up there, so that's cool.
All right, it's time to do Twitter follows.
Yeah, that's all you, buddy.
All right, so hey, this is what happened with the Twitter follows. So Frank and I, we'd kind of talked about how we're going to run this Twitter account, and we never thought we were going to actually hunt for followers, right? Like be predatory. But we did specifically say, hey, if you're going to follow us, we'll follow you back, right? Right? Until I realized that anything we mention in a podcast, we basically get some random ass follow for. So we're followed by 18 Batman, Bat_man, Batman quotes accounts, or Metallica lyrics, Metallica_lyrics accounts, because we did, an episode on music. So all of these bots are following us now. So I was like, well, fuck it. You know what? If a lot of these bots are just going to follow us back anyway, let's go follow some comic book related podcasts and Twitter accounts and just see if they'll follow us back. So I sort of had some downtime in my commute home from work because I do a van pool. So I sort of just started following random ass comic book accounts that were suggested. And it sort of caused a shitstorm of follows.
Okay, so that's how that happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because literally, I was at work. I told you we were going to talk about this. I was at work scrolling through our Rolled Spine podcast timeline, and we have some super fucking shitty Metallica lyrics.
Well, I mean, let's not disparage Metallica lyrics. For all we know, they're beloved, avid listeners.
Please listen. And all they posted for the day were the top 10 camel toe pictures that you can check out now if you click this link. And the next one was hottest ways to this brand new app that's super hot to pick. And then I've noticed that all of these end in lyrics accounts tweet this stupid fucking clickbaity, nearly pornography out on our fucking timeline. And I'm like, fuck, we're following that guy back just because that bot followed us? Fuck it. I'm going to go follow some comic book stuff.
Okay. Well, is that actually on our timeline?
Yes, it's on our fucking timeline.
Oh, well, I mean, what we read, but it's not what other people read. Unless we retweet it, they're not going to read it as our shit.
No, but they still follow us. No. We're not retweeting their top 10 camel toe
Yeah, that's
posts.
what I'm saying. Is like if you're using our timeline
Right.
for your own reading pleasure, I guess, but that would seem pretty overwhelming to me.
No, that's not my point. My point is that we gave them a follow.
Yeah, and so they should give us a follow back.
Well, they do. They follow us.
Yeah, well, they follow us in the first place, and we give them a follow
Right.
back.
So
yeah.
so then I was like, well, why don't I follow as the rolled spot? Why don't
Bunch
we
of random
follow-
bullshit.
No, it's not random bullshit. They're at least comic book related.
Yeah.
All of these are comic book related.
Okay.
Well, some of these were like I'm about to say Batman quotes. Batman quotes was not a one I followed.
Right,
Completely.
right.
But
they followed us, and that's why we're
so then we
showing
follow
our
back.
appreciation.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So some of these are me. Some of these are not me.
Yeah.
A lot of these are me.
Well, all of it is a little bit you, because whether you actively pursued it or it's just the quality of the podcast that you helped to bring
right.
the kids to the yard for our tasty milkshakes.
Right. So I just figured, hey, look, we're following shitty ass bot accounts. Let's just unprovoked go follow some comic book accounts. So here goes. Twitter follows Alan Young, All American Comics, Anderson Spider E&G, Andrew R. Oh, and Frank's making me do this because I'm responsible. Andrew R. Jewell, Arlene Argento, Batman Quotes, Big Biting Pig, Bill Roth, Blake Northcott, Bone Dragon Comics, Bookcase, Book Free Fantasy, Brand Comics, Brando Text, CD Comic, Children of Sutro, Cody Perez, The Collector, all in caps, exclamation point.
These are two different people, one with and one without gaps.
Correct.
And different
Although the
addresses.
handles are totally different, right? Comic Book Lion, Comic Books and Movies, Comic Buzz, Comic Diva, Comic or Digital, Comic Social Club, Comics Tune, Crit Justice, Crowd T Comics, Daniel Arthur Smith, Dark Helmet, Deborah Beale, Derek Hyde, Dylan Bennett, Dobbs, Eric Mannix, Erica Rhodes, Philippost Media Jobs, Five Nations, Foot Pound Force, Giovanna Blaylock, Greatest Rapper. That's quite the title. Think highly of yourself. Greg Kemp, Grimerica, Hailstorm Comics, Heather Dorcas, I.H. Lacking, I Read Comic Books, Ink Puddle, Inspire and Motivate, J.D. Baker, Jack Mavericks,
J.D. Barker.
J.D. Barker, thank you for correcting me, Jackie Earl Haley, John E. Blade, Jonathan Turner, Jorge Luis Velasco, Keith Hendricks, Kevin Streeter, Kindred Digital Books, KTEE, Lady Sarah, Lake Runs Red, Lynn Zoan, Life. Go. You want to correct me on that one? Go ahead.
No, I just think it's Lind Zone. I think
Lind
they're
Zone.
lenders.
It's a lending bot account. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Lind Zone. I'll let you know if I need any fucking predatory interest rates. Life After Flash, Luther M. Seiler, The Manipulators, Manolis Sifranolacturns, at Average Joe VC is the handle.
Yeah, I think we need to go
Is the
there.
at address. Okay. Mark Steen, Mark Stubbs, Matt Warface Arts, Metallica Quotes. My boys at Metallica Quotes. My God, that is the worst account ever. Misty Hewitt, Modern Horrors, Mr. Teacher and Panda, My Star Wars Story, Neil Young, which is at Neil Young, Lyrics Neil Young, which is another shitty fucking account. Fuck Neil Young.
Old man, take a look at my life.
Shut up, fool. I'm only in the ends. Let me keep talking. I've got a rhythm going. New Worlds Comics, Ninja Economics, which is totally legit. Ninja Economics. Tell somebody you practice that. Say hi to the IRS for me.
I just like that it's this petite Asian lady whose picture's on there because it wasn't bad enough to be Ninja Economics. Let's like really racist it up a little
let's
bit.
really racist it up.
Yeah.
Unless that's a legit account, in which case we apologize. Thank you for listening to the podcast.
If it's a proud part of your cultural heritage, the ninja, I guess you could claim that for yourself.
Yes. Otherwise, shame on you.
You know, stealth assassins who slit people's throats in their sleep.
Yeah. And then analyze fucking economic principles and whatnot. Norse Foundry, Old Toy Productions, Out of the Fridge, Patrick Klein, Phil, aka at Phil_Thomas, Podcasts and Reviews, Pulp Cultured. Is that Rochelle Boomtown?
I think it's just plain old Rachel.
Just plain old Rachel? Did I frank that up for my next? Rachel Boomtown, Ramos Comics, Reality Crowd TV, Retro Gamer, Robert Omoto, Roxy Hayes, S. DiGiorgio.
S. DiGiorgio, I believe.
S. DiGiorgio. That sounds way better. Scarlett Johansson.
I've spanked it to you once or twice, so thanks, darling.
Yeah, thank you for listening to the podcast. He's masturbated to pictures of you. Stealth, Slav Comics, Street Cult. Nobody's listening right now. Anyway.
That's not Stealth, that's Sheath. Speaking of Sheaths, Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett. Sheath, Slav Comics. Street, nobody's listening. Street Cult, nobody's listening. Stephen Walker, thank you for listening to the podcast. Strange Quirk Comics, appreciate seeing your name again. Super Podcasto, Tot Pod.
That's a strange quark, by the way.
Tot Pod, thank you for having a shorter name. Today's comic.
You say Todd or Tot?
Tot.
Okay,
Pod.
like a tater
tot pod. Yes, tater tot pod. Now I've said their name so many times, I take back my earlier statement. Today's comic, interesting name. Toys and Comics, very descriptive. The Triskelion.
The Triskelion.
The Triskelion.
It's referencing Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe.
Oh, word?
Or the vocabulary of a person with a bigger vocabulary than me. Because Triskelion is not in my vocabulary.
Troy Blackford, Tumble Creek Entertainment, which is taking out some vowels. It's actually entertainment. Ugly Woman, Don't Be So Hard on Yourself. UK Bumps Keys Limited. Ultimate Crowdfunding. Shout out Ultimate Crowdfunding. See some great posts on our timeline from Ultimate Crowdfunding. Oh, and thanks for the DM you probably sent from your fucking bot account, which we have a rash of people asking us to support their Kickstarter lately.
Yeah.
Universal Radio. Hey, we're not going to help you with your Kickstarter. We're poor. Please stop asking us for money. Universal Radio. Until Bin. Viewster. Voice Out 9JA, Warped Factor, Wayward Nerd, Weirdly Comics, William Shakespeare. Whoa, I've spanked it to you.
That bald, yeah, and then you rubbed it all over that bald paint.
Yeah, Wonderman Comics, and that's it.
I just felt the need to extend that as much as I could because I'm the guy who had to fucking find all of those confirmation emails in the Gmail account and then arrange them in alphabetical order.
So badass. Do this in Excel; it's a lot easier.
And I do the Mighty Marvel Marching Society, guys who both favorited and retweeted our stuff to promote us, even over our long hiatus.
Thank you for the Marvel Marketing. Adam Blackmoon, Angel Velasquez, Bradley J. Tim, Charlton Hero. My man Charlton Hero. What's up, man? Adam Blackmoon, too. These are like my friends. CJ. There's a good old CJ. Count Druncula, of course.
Wait, what about Chris William?
Oh, Chris Williams is my longtime homie, as is Bradley J. Tim, a.k.a. Dr. Flux, with 2 X's. Darren and Ruth Sutherland, they're my new friends. Dead Vinyl, old friend. Eternal Rage, old friend. Fantastic Verse, old friend. Film Reel Podcast, new friend. Firestorm fan, First back. Old friend, sorry there.
Well, the thing is about the Mighty Marvel Marching Society is that these guys tend to be pretty stable about, pimping us. So God bless.
The First Bat. Hey, at The First Bat, you've got a shit ton of followers. I don't know how you do it. Send some of them our way, dude. Straight up. AKA also old friend and new friend. Future Primitive, Hall of Justice, Cord Industries, Larry W. Looper Jr., Liz O., Lord Horsticles, my man, Lord Horsticles. What's going on, homie?
He's been around long enough so we can pronounce that goddamn name of his.
Yeah, I don't even blink at Horsticles anymore, people. Marvel Inc., Miss Moneypenny, Mr. X, trademark, My Star Wars Story, Nerdgasmo, which is what I had when I read William Shakespeare's name a second ago. Odell Abner, my man Odell Abner Dracula. What is up, homie? Long time no say. Odyssey Unleashed, Outside the Long Box, another one of our good old friends. The penultimate Randy Micah Smith, of course you're here. Pittsburgh Nerd Pod. What's up, Pittsburgh? Randy Caldwell, another one of our old friends. Richard Calvert, and of course,
Sin. alias Scarecrow.
Yes.
Spelled with a Y.
That's why I follow him at alias Scarecrow. He's a very nice young man.
Shall I give you a break and do the Twitter favorites?
Yes, let me sip this beverage here.
Okay. We received Twitter favorites from Al Mega First Crusader, Alexi Gueros, Amino Acid Comic Book, Amy Rowland, Annalise, Anthony Durso, Ask the Moon, Baked English Podcast, Ben Cohen, Bestbooks.ca, Between the Pages.
I'm sorry, so that's bestebooks.ca.
Pardon. Between the Pages, City War, Crowdfund Resources, getting around. Cheryl at Piggy Mouth, which I love saying. Chris Perry, Chris Thompson, C. Miller, Charles Washington, Comical Podcast, Couple Things Podcast, Christina at Poison Blowfish. I also like saying that.
David Fiore.
No, I haven't given
David
up.
Golding
Just rolling
Artist.
up. No, this is my section. David Fiore, David Golding Artist, Ed Moore, Elijah Medj, Jim Feed, Jessica Sun, Joseph Crawford, Joseph Tavano, Kanish Kabbalah, who, went away and came back again, Land of the Creeps, Longbox Graveyard, Marzo Khalif, Miss Impolitic, Moldwitch, Mythmaking, etc., One Room with a View, Orbital Podcast, Party Roll Podcast, Pirate Mike, Plop Cartoons, Professor Riptide, Reese Finley, Sir Kayak, Superheroes Speak, Top 5 Road Crew, Uproar Comics, Vidyup.com, Wetsuit, and Ziggy and Mr. Jaffrey. Plus retweet. I'll do the retweets too. You want the retweets? Okay, you can take the retweets.
Retweets, Flotospan, Keith G. Baker, Pure BS Podcast, Siskoid, Tanya Malone, and Wednesday Comics.
And Adam Black Moon gave us a number of hashtag weekday pumps amongst other podcasts and such, including the Wednesday Warriors, the Team Thursday, Furious Friday, Friday Night Follow, and Saturdays. Spelled with Z. I thought I emphasized that, but, just in case you missed it. And then Couch Commandos, what was that about? Oh, yes. We were given a Follow Friday notations from Couch Commandos, the first bat, Lord Horstocles, Mr. X, and Superhero Speak. Chris Thompson at Pop Culture Hound gave us kind of a nice little pat on the back when we were having trouble getting our podcast shit together. Wrote, one of those weeks, I know the feeling. Editing is the hardest and often least recognized part of any podcast. Good luck.
Hey, we had a nice little conversation with Chris Thompson. He seems like a very nice young man also.
Yes, indeed.
The next one is from The Comic Kingdom. Thanks for the follow. Comics rock. Tell Disney fans want Comic Kingdom at the Magic Kingdom.
So nice that he managed to slide that self-promotion in there. Comics Tune wrote, what's your personal favorite comic author? And I'm going to say, for Mr. Fixit, I'm going to say Peter David, since he couldn't even form cohesive sentences in his presence.
Top, Peter David. Top.
As far as me, there's a lot of new guys I like, but I'm going to be cheesy and go with a childhood favorite and say Jim Starlin.
Jim Starlin's good stuff.
Yeah, I don't have a huge interest in reading modern day Jim Starlin, to be perfectly frank, but he was so influential for me as a kid that he's definitely one of the dream guys for me as either an interview or as someone to commission artwork from, and I still love his artwork. So
I'm a Dave Michelini, Bob Layton, and I really like Roger Stern as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and you met one of the three at least.
Yeah.
You got a piece. Did you get a piece from him, right?
No.
You didn't?
No,
I don't understand
he
that.
He signed my Demon in a Bottle issue that I found.
What was it, because you're poor?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, dude. Let's see. Kareem Rules on episode 27, Marvel DC Movie Slate 2020, Part 6, The Final Insult. Kareem said, racist people.
Thanks for the comment, Kareem Ruiz.
Inarticulate people.
Yeah.
Failing to expound upon declarative statements people.
Well, hey, whatever. We struck enough accord for him to leave a comment. Racist people.
I don't know if it's directed at us or if he's just pointing out, how about those racist people?
I feel like maybe he started typing
and
his phone died. It was just like, oh shit, I hit comment. Oh, my phone died.
Discoid wrote of episode 29, Dr. Zero. Heads up, true believers. The Shadowline stuff shows up in Secret Wars Squadron Sinister #1 this week. I wouldn't have known what they were talking about without your podcast. We love to be educational around here. It's important to know about beleaguered, long dead, short-lived comic book lines. To enjoy modern comic books that have no annotations to them.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Hey, and you're welcome. Firestorm fan.
My only regret is we didn't get around to that Mark Hazard Merc episode that I was really hoping for.
I cannot tell if you're being serious or not.
I really would like to do a Mark Hazard Merc podcast.
I'm guessing you are based on your conversation with Peter David.
Yeah, because I did like the book. Or Starbrand. I would totally do a Starbrand podcast given the opportunity. I like Starbrand. Did you ever read Starbrand?
No.
Okay. Jim Shooter wrote it for the first almost year. John Romita Jr. drew it for much of that year as well. I'm just trying to seed it.
Is it on Marvel Unlimited?
Actually, I do believe it is on Marvel
Shut up.
Unlimited.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I think that some of them
Well,
are on there.
Damn it. All right. I'm
Not Mark Hazard Merc, I assure you, but I think there is some Star Brand because they did like if you can believe this isn't enough of an oxymoron. Star Brand Classic trade paperback.
I told you that's like when Third Eye Blind put out a greatest hits. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're putting out a greatest hits. You got the 4 songs or the 3 songs.
Yeah, they're all on that one album.
Yeah. What is classic? That's like putting out
The red one with the guy covering the eye.
Yeah, with the thing. Yeah. You're telling me Star Brand's got a classic version?
All right, can I graduate?
Yeah. Just step back from that ledge, my friend. And enjoy your semi-charmed life.
Whoa.
All right, our next comment's from Firestorm Fan on episode number 36, The Ultimate Allegiance. Hi, Frank and not Frank 1. That would be me. I somewhat enjoyed your last episode of the Marvel Superheroes podcast. That's high praise. Marvel Digital Unlimited, not related to your episode specifically, but Marvel related. Last week, I subscribed to Marvel Digital Unlimited service, and it's changed my life. In the last week, I've been reading tons of Marvel comics. Been digging 80s Daredevil, early Uncanny X-Men, recent X-Men, and even Alpha Flight. Yes, Alpha Flight. My stepson is also using my login, well, we just sold you out there, buddy, to read tons of Deadpool comics. I think I've read more comics in the last week than I've read in the entire 2014. Your subscription works out to less than $6 a month. Thank you, math. Drop 2 ongoing Marvel books and their service pays for itself. Plus, once a comic has been on the shelf for 6 months, it shows up in the digital unlimited service. I'm a patient guy. I can wait 6 months for my Daredevil and Hawkeye. The subscription service is a brilliant move by Marvel, transitioning the customer from a consumer model to a subscriber model. Demonstrates that Marvel is vastly superior to DC in the digital arena. Spider-Man and Avengers. I consider myself a fan of the Avengers comics. While I don't read them anymore, I did faithfully follow every Avengers title for nearly 20 years. When I realized that many classic Avengers fans struggle with Spider-Man as an Avenger, see not Frank 1, you have to accept that he's no longer a newcomer to the team. He's now been a member of the Avengers for 10 years. That's 20% of the entire Avengers history. How long does he have to be in the team before people accept him as an Avenger? Is it just because not Frank 1 didn't read any Avengers comics with Spider-Man on the team? Does that invalidate his status among Earth's mightiest heroes? Get over it, not Frank 1. Guest appearances and sickness. As a previous guest on your show, I can validate Count Druncula's health condition. Guest appearance on the Marvel Superheroes podcast may cause vomiting, fever, night sweats, clown feet, nightmares, swell pituitary gland, earwigs, baldness, polka dancing, and an increased risk. I just want to say, this is the most Firestorm Fan comment ever written, ever. Earwigs, polka dancing, and an increased risk of serious and sometimes fatal stomach ulcers and bleeding. Elderly patients may be at greater risk. Ohatmu. You heard it here, folks. Frank admitted that DC's Who's Who is better than Marvel's Ohatmu. If you ever
DC's Who.
DC's Who's Who. DC's Detective Comics Who's Who is better than the official handbook of the Marvel Universe! If you ever get around to recording an Ohatmu podcast, fat chance, I offer my services to cover the best Marvel character ever. Armadillo and Frogman. Not Frank 1 is your quote-unquote shag. I was so thankful that you finally ran out of audio clips of me to insert from our 4-hour marathon recording session back in December. And right as I had thought, you insulted me by comparing Not Frank 1 to me. Really, that guy is the best quote-unquote shag you can come up with for your show? Pale comparison, my friend. Maybe if I had any sleep for 6 days, turned off my phone, my profanity filter, took a bunch of Quaaludes, and forgot what cool superheroes were. Frank, so sorry to hear about your car and monitor. Rough week. Just had a thought on your computer. If I've come to rely on a file backup system like CrashPlan. Backups whatever data you want to the cloud so you can access them from any computer. Saved my tail a few times and been a huge help when I'm out of town. Away from my computer and need files. Keep up the mediocre work.
Was there any particular comments you wanted to address, not Frank 1?
Yeah, let me
I know that I have one I want to address. We're still going to do a Shag episode. The Wild Ages of Marvel will include Shag. So I have an entire episode of additional material that I have not even touched yet. So I'm not done with Shag by a long shot. And I haven't recorded that with that guy in months.
Hey, listen, Shag, I don't know who the hell, I can't even remember on that podcast now who said that I was like you. And I think I immediately said, you and I are not alike because you know way the fuck more about comic books than I do. I am in no way the expert on this show in any form. Unless you want to consult with me about sarcasm or curse words. I am your expert.
That's what I'm saying, though, is on his show, the Fire and Water podcast, he shows much less knowledge of comics than Rob Kelly does, and he brings sarcasm and points out where all the hot girls are and can't pronounce the full name of his favorite character correctly.
Nuclear Man?
Nuclear. So you are the Shag, because you can't pronounce it either.
I was saying it incorrectly.
Oh, okay. You were doing it periodically.
Come on,
okay.
Come on, bro. Frank will never do any sort of cloud-based service because Frank is paranoid of the government. Sorry. Excellent suggestion.
If the government could read my mind, they'd know I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
To quote the Vandals.
It's an excellent suggestion. I have given it up a long time ago. Let me see. That's about it. Hey,
Okay.
Marvel Unlimited's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, you just finally got it. You finally hooked it up. You were the last one of our crew to hook up the Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah. Well,
Probably anticipating of not actually being able to physically be in the room with us for very much longer.
right. Well, and, I think Fixit actually got it on accident, right? He
forgot to cancel it.
After
Yeah, so I had it for 6 months. Like, well, no, you tried to get it for free and it didn't work out for you.
Yeah, it happens.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read this one from Ange related to episode 37, Hawkeye and the New Black Widow. Can only hope we get an entire episode with you guys doing the Black Widow cartoon voice. Well, I think only Mac did the cartoon voice.
No,
I
that
did
was
some.
you were the one doing the Black Widow voice.
No, you did a good Russian accent, and I did some horrible thing that didn't sound like anything.
Well, I think that's why he wants us to do a whole episode.
That could be it. I have very little comic experience with Hawkeye and have never really heard enough to make me think I am missing something. I bought the first issue of the Fraction Aha book, but it didn't grab me enough to make me continue to get it. I have heard it is a great book. Well, now that we both have Marvel Unlimited, we'll probably read it for $6 a month. Lastly, Hawkeye is my bet for the Avengers movie Deadpool. I can only hope. That ship sailed. I don't think words can say how sad I am that Hawkeye survives this movie. Oh, okay. He already knew that by the time he got a follow-up comment. The time is right for some Scarlet Witch Vision stuff. Maybe Burns' run on West Coast. Probably we'd go earlier than that, I think. I think we'd go back to Thomas Buscema if we're going to do any Vision stuff. And it's not currently planned, but I'm sure we'll get around to it eventually.
Word.
Hey, Spider-Man on the Avengers. Going back to Firestorm fan Shag's comment. There's a lot of things that have gone on for long periods of time that should have been dealt with and weren't. To me, Spider-Man as an Avenger is the Confederate flag of superhero comics. And they should, have dealt with that a long time ago. Ideally, buried it, burned it, some way retcon that. Let's have another brand new day and just wipe out the entire time Spider-Man was ever an Avenger.
Pretty shocked by this comment you're making right now.
That time period he was talking about was pretty much the entire Bendis run. And I think a lot of true Avengers fans just want nothing to do with that entire run and skipped it. And I'm cool with that. We can just forget that ever happened. Especially because I think Marvel's going to reboot their continuity to some degree following Secret Wars anyway, so maybe it did never happen. Oh wait, Miles Morales is going to be an Avenger, but that's okay because he's not Peter Parker. So I'll even expand it. I'll even allow for Spider-Man to be an Avenger so long as it's not Peter Parker. That's how generous I am in this respect. There's just that one line I won't cross. Peter Parker can't be an Avenger. Can't believe in that.
I guess I should read some Miles Morales books or something. He's like a big deal apparently now.
Yeah, he's well liked.
I feel like some tide has turned and people didn't even give a shit about Peter Parker anymore. They just want Miles Morales.
I think
Is
what
that
it
just
is,
the internet?
It's just there's too many white heterosexual people in superhero movies, and there's a lot of non-white, non-heterosexual people who watch superhero movies and would like to see something different.
Okay, that's cool.
And certainly, if we're going to do another frickin' origin story, let's do Miles Morales' origin and not Peter Parker's.
I think that I believe we've seen Peter Parker's origin in the movies a few times, right?
Once or twice,
Like a billion times.
Yeah.
Right. All right, our next comment is from...
Actually, we still haven't finished the one with Ange because we got sidetracked there. Because he reminded me of the Spider-Man part. Let's see. Oh yeah, his dislike of Hawk. Oh yeah, no, we pretty much got it covered. Well, one thing I did want to point out though, because I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Kyle Benning's podcast actually. The what is it? King sized fun, like giant sized comics, king sized fun, or something like that. If I'm going to promote it, I should probably have referenced
Shout
what
out
it's called.
Kyle Benning.
Yeah, shout out Kyle Benning. By the way, Kyle Benning is quite the trooper on the podcast front. He actually does his podcast often from his car.
Holy shit.
He's just like recording it on his lunch break, sitting in his car on a tablet. So, that's dedication.
Oh, hell yeah, it is.
But anyhow,
Respect.
but he did one with some other guy. They were both good, and they both had sound points to make about Avengers Age of Ultron. And one of them was talking about how Vision is one of the probably the most faithful adaptations of a comic book character to film ever. But then it occurred to me, it's like, well, yeah, but the thing I always liked about the Vision is he didn't really fly. He became immaterial and would like kind of float at you. And that's one of those important distinctions where it's like he doesn't actually properly fly. He does something a little bit different, and that should set him apart in how he moves and how he relates to his environment. So when he swoops down and picks up Scarlet Witch and has a romantic moment in midair with her, just like fucking Superman, that kind of ruined that little part for me.
How come I don't read anywhere that he's Adam Warlock? Am I the only person that figured this shit out?
Yeah, you'd think other people would get on that bandwagon.
How has nobody else talked about this? He's fucking Adam Warlock.
I think people are still waiting for Adam Warlock to show up in Guardians or something. But if there's one character I don't want James Gunn having anything to do with, it's fucking Adam Warlock. Because I do not see him getting that character at all.
You don't want some kooky, sarcastic Adam Warlock bopping around?
Look, the Annihilation event, he couldn't even manage to work out characters like Drax and Star-Lord and Gamora. So as somebody as nuanced as Adam Warlock and as just deadly serious to almost the point of satire, how intensely emo Warlock can be. No, James Gunn, please, no.
Oh, anybody missed it in our Avengers Age of Ultron review?
It was long. It was 2.5 hours long.
It was really fucking long, so you may have missed it. My theory, well, this may be long.
Yeah, if it's on the Captain America episode, it's going to be long.
Yeah. My theory is that they've just taken Adam Warlock and merged him with Vision because he's got the gemstone in his head. He was born in a cocoon. I mean, it's all there.
Yeah. The main issue is that we've seen the actual Warlock cocoon in Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's
No, I think that got debunked.
What do you mean? That's
James Gunn. James Gunn's like, no, that was not Adam Warlock's cocoon. Like that was just.
Then why did it look like Adam Warlock's cocoon?
I'm just saying it was. He was specifically asked.
I think somebody in the art department must have fucking pranked his ass then, because that was Adam Warlock's cocoon.
Maybe they pranked him.
It's on the fucking cover of the book he appears in. It's hard to. It's pretty distinct.
They made the analogy of the worm that goes into a cocoon and emerges a butterfly. Like they made even these analogies in Avengers: Age of Ultron talking about Vision.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I'm not disputing. I'm in no way debunking your argument. I'm just saying that maybe the reason why everybody else isn't catching on to that is A, they may not have read Warlock comics, and B, they might be waiting for him to turn up Guardians.
They definitely haven't read Adam Warlock comics. Yeah. But he's got an infinity gem in his forehead.
Yeah,
he's fucking
all
Adam
ponderous and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
right, and he's ponderous, super ponderous.
I'm wondering if super ponderous is an entirely new coin term.
Super ponderous.
I don't know if super and ponderous have ever really fit together.
Ultra ponderous. All right, next comment comes from Siskoid on episode 37, Hawkeye and the New Black Widow. I'm actually pretty passionate about Hawkeye. He's one of my favorite Marvel heroes. I met him in Avengers number 174, where the entire team is captured by the Collector and he fights alone to free them, even as Collector thinks he's lame, etc. I talked about it here. He posted a link. Did we repost this link? We'll repost this link.
I will work it out.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. Chances are you know Siskoid better than you know us, so you probably have already seen this link.
Siskoid's blog of geekery is quite popular.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You know this. Go to Siskoid's blog that you already know about and search for it to find it. I love underdog stories, and this was one of my favorites. Justice League Unlimited pulled the same thing with Green Arrow and the Seven Soldiers of Victory. Why would you bring up Green Arrow and Hawkeye? That's so weird. As did Morrison on his run of JLA, but Hawkeye is the original Archer underdog. Loved his bit in Secret Wars, which echoes the sketch you edited in where he has to make arrows to keep fighting. And then it was in West Coast Avengers mini and series. And it was in line.
The lineup I prefer.
It was in the lineup I prefer because Hawkeye led it. Cap is a confident leader, but Clint is the guy who's filled with doubt. Doesn't come as naturally to him, and he must find a way to make it work. I read Solo Avengers because he was in it, though I'd considered it second prize. It was what he got instead of a proper solo series, which is absolutely correct. I lost track of Marvel in the 90s and caught up with Hawkeye in the late aughts. I guess he'd had other identities, etc., but as soon as he returned as Hawkeye, you bet I got every miniseries he was in. I love his relationship with Mockingbird, and even when they're estranged. In fact, his failed relationships are hilarious on both the Fraction series and Secret Avengers, two books I love. The first for its experimentalism, the second for its humor. Haven't read the all-new Hawkeye yet. I need to more in the Fraction book first. I'm hoping it's good, of course, because as long as I'm reading comics, I'm going to need my Hawkeye fix. That all said, he's completely uninteresting in the movies, not the same character at all.
Yes.
Yeah, good comment.
Yeah. I'd like to read Secret Avengers because L.A. Scott was writing that, and not only is he quite the little lightning rod on Twitter in an interesting way, but I love his book Zero from Image Comics. It's really an interesting spy book. It's one of those things, I hate spy stories, so I keep assuming that, okay, this is going to be the last trade I read, and then I read it, it's like, fuck, no, I got to read another one of these. This is just too damn good. The series is going to come to an end, but based on that book alone, I want to get around to reading Secret Avengers eventually, because I want to see what that guy would do with that group of characters. Even though the actual premise of the Secret Avengers I find really lame, and I'm not into it, and I'm just sick to death of every damn team book being an Avengers book. When it's like Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, and a few other assorted characters, including Hawkeye, apparently.
Our next comment is from Count Druncula on episode number 37, Hawkeye and the Black Widow. Of the two major comic book archers, I've always liked Hawkeye a lot more than Green Arrow because A, his purple and blue costume was unlike any other in comics, and B, his attitude seemed genuine and born of a kid who grew up poor and raised by carnies, unlike the billionaire playboy turned bleeding heart crusader. I've said this many times, but the film version of Hawkeye neutered the most interesting part of the character, his attitude. Hawkeye is an anti-authority boss hater. He was Wolverine before Wolverine, calling out Captain America and putting down old-fashioned by-the-numbers strategy until the two eventually found a grudging respect for one another. The MCU Hawkeye sacrificed that part of his character by making him just another agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is a shame because Renner is a better actor than that.
Yeah, and I think we've already mentioned too, Green Arrow's entire personality is stolen from Hawkeye. And it happened back in the 70s, so a lot of people don't seem to understand that. One thing I think is cool about the Arrow TV show is that he's back to being a Batman ripoff like he was created to be. Let Hawkeye be Hawkeye. And let Green Arrow just fucking die in a ditch somewhere because he's got nothing to offer the world. Besides an alternative to Batman when you can't license that character for a CW TV show.
Ooh, well, yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Was that it? This comment was probably before Age of Ultron, too, so Hawkeye got a little better.
Not enough better. Not if you're a Hawkeye fan, that's not going to make you embrace Jeremy Renner since he's even further away from the Marvel Comics version of the character.
All right, our next comment is from Darcy on episode 37, Hawkeye and the New Black Widow. I must have listened to a different podcast than the rest. I was expecting to hear about Hawkeye and the Black Widow, a la Tales of Suspense number 64, but instead I heard debates about Cyborg versus Black Panther, Mockingbird versus Black Canary, and Captain Marvel versus... did I click the MCU link by accident? By the way, I can't produce any accent to save my life, so you won't hear my criticisms... you won't hear any criticisms from me about yours. Thanks.
Usually when you get a comment like that, it's because they're being sarcastic, but I think she literally must have clicked on the wrong link because it's not that. And other people are commenting on the episode that heard it. So there was some kind of technological fuck up there.
Darcy, thank you for listening. Continue to listen. I think that you're freaking awesome.
Yes. Except at the hitting a button skills, apparently.
You take that back, Darcy.
So Kyle Benning, who we mentioned earlier in the podcast there, on the same episode as everybody else, finally a Hawkeye episode. He is one of my favorite characters solely because he and I share the same hometown, Waverly, Iowa. Hawkeye's origin was told in the Roy Thomas written Avengers number 19 from 1965. At that time, the population of Waverly would have been around 7,000 people. It currently is in the ballpark of 11,000 people. Roy is from St. Louis, which in 1965 would have been about a 7 or 8 hour drive away from Waverly. So who knows why this small, northeast Iowa farm community struck Roy's fancy as the birthplace for Hawkeye, but we'll take it. Stuck on that in NYC. With regards to Ultimate Hawkeye, yes, he does have a meta power or ability. It's enhanced sight, which allows him to be such a pinpoint marksman. I believe it is also implied that Movieverse Hawkeye has that same enhanced sight power. There is a single throwaway line in either Avengers or Thor where Hawkeye says something to the effect of, I prefer watching from a distance as he observes something from afar on a balcony. I think that's generally accepted as his acknowledging that he has enhanced vision. I think that's a reach. Like a big reach.
Yeah.
And in fact, that came up on that podcast I listened to, and his friend was like, also, that's a reach.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't feel one way or the other about it. I don't really care.
Yeah. Well, and then what they came up with was that you can take it either way if you want to.
Yeah.
But no, it's a total fucking reach. Sorry, Kyle.
All right, our next comment is from BS Podcast Network. This week on @Sci-Fi Podcast, Sci-Fact Podcast, a shout out to @Rolled Spine, Hawkeye Talk, and the Dyson Sphere. Feel yourself get smarter. Yeah, I listened to that. I listened to this podcast to give a shout out. It was very nice of them.
Yeah, I pulled an audio clip from that.
So we got a shout out from another podcast, the Science Faction Podcast, hosted by Devin Kraft and Steven Dominguez. It happened on their 47th episode. What they do is they talk about general sci-fi type stuff, but then they also integrate hard science conversations as well. So these guys are definitely smarter than any of the three of us and possibly bigger geeks than any of the three of us, but maybe not so much on the comic books as they mentioned on the podcast. We've got a little audio excerpt from the episode. I figure give you a chance to sample the show, and if you like it, we've got a link available so you can go check it out. There's actually 2 Science Faction podcasts. You might want to check the official Science Faction podcast webpage in your search engines, and we'll have a link up on the blog as well, so that you can get to the correct one. But this is from episode 47, April 23rd, 2015.
Did you see today, so yeah, today, Tax Day, on Twitter, there was another podcast that gave us a shout-out?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's a comic book podcast. I really wish I had their name up, so I'm frantically scrolling through my apps and going to Twitter to find it right now. But it's a podcast about comic books, and they tweeted at us and said that they gave us a shout out. I started listening to their show. Let's see, it's called the Rolled Spine Podcast. You can tweet at them @Rolled Spine. And they thanked a bunch of people, and they just talk about comics. And so I started listening to their podcast. It's really good. It's like 3 guys that just chat, and They're talking about Hawkeye and Black Widow. I only listened to the part where they were talking about Hawkeye, and they were ripping on him, and it was wonderful. I mean, and these guys obviously read lots of comics, so they were like, first, in the comics, this is the kind of character he was, where he came from. In the movies, this is how they're doing them. This is where they could move with him in the future. This is why he's terrible. He only has arrows. It's awful. It was pretty funny.
I mean, he really has no superpowers, really.
No, and that was one of the things they were talking about. Is apparently at some point in Marvel's history, they tried to give him like super sight or something like that, and then it was promptly forgotten about. So who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've even heard you and Ben were bagging on him recently when you guys were talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the movies, Daredevil, and you were talking about like the future of some of the characters, and like, oh, Hawkeye, you can just throw him away or have him be killed, or he can go on S.H.I.E.L.D. because he's such a small character. But I really like Jeremy Renner, and so I'm like, but they got such a good actor to play him. They got to do something good with that character.
They have to, and they got to give Hawkeye something to do. They have to give Jeremy Renner something to act about, which what they were mentioning in their podcast was that apparently this movie's going to have more focus on him and Hulk as characters.
In
Age of Ultron, the next Avengers movie, yeah.
Well, because it was kind of funny in the first one how Hawkeye was just like he is instantly turned against the Avengers. Yeah. And it makes him like basically a red shirt in a way. Just we needed one of you to go to the dark side so you could be manipulated and they could save you, but you yourself are worthless and have no character development because you're going to be under mind control. Yeah. And that's exactly what they use that character for.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just it seems lazy. But the defense for that is, in the comics, he was originally a bad guy, so it's kind of paying homage to, like, when he first came about, but whatever. Anyway, so, Rolled Spine Podcast, thank you for the shout-out, and hey,
awesome.
There's a shout-out in return. You guys are cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue listening to your podcast, because I don't have any good comic book podcasts. I've got sci-fi, and I've got funnies, and I've got science, but no comics. Really, there are a few like geek type podcasts that I listen to, but it's all of geekdom. But this really focused on the comics, which I liked.
Nice, yeah.
So
I don't know much about comics, and other than what they put in the movies. So
well, there you go. So you could learn a lot from that podcast, I'm sure.
I could, yeah.
The duo go on to talk about Lego Marvel characters, how the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier would destroy everything in its wake, the Zack Snyder, Superman, Batman, Justice League movies, the failure of Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's a good podcast. Check it out.
Hey, thanks for listening, and you have a very fascinating podcast yourself.
Randy Caldwell merely quoted, "Went nuclear without a fallout shelter," which I'm glad we get to say in an Audible podcast. And again, that was totally on the spot. I don't know where the fuck that came from.
Yeah, I can't
I channeled that shit from somebody smarter than me.
Count Dracula at Black Canary Fan on episode number 38, Marvel SHP MP DC Spring Special 2015. I'm 15 minutes into this episode, and I have no coherent thoughts to post as responses. This is such a schizophrenic episode, and for the Marvel Superheroes podcast, that's really saying something. The best thing about this episode was that it introduced me to Straight Outta Compton trailer. I heard about the movie a long time ago, but it's nice to see the ad. I also really appreciate now how hard they go in on the trailer to make Paul Giamatti the hero of the NWA biopic, because I was afraid the film would be too quote-unquote urban for my delicate sensibilities. Yeah, that's...
What was that word you said that sounded kind of like biopic but wasn't?
Biopic?
Yeah, isn't that something like Steve Austin had implanted in him back in the 70s?
Stone Cold Steve Austin?
No, it's $6 Million Man version.
Is it biopic?
It's biopic. Biopic? What the fuck? Biopic?
I don't know. That does kind of sound like a medical procedure.
Yeah, no.
Shit.
Okay. I don't know what the fuck that episode was either.
Hey, that was the worst episode. That was probably the worst episode.
You think? Nah, you think it was worse than Kazar?
No, that's worse than Kazar.
Okay. Well, that's why it was the MPD DC episode. In case somebody missed the conjunction of acronyms there.
Conjunction junction?
What's that function? Does it have to do with biopics?
Hey, read this comment from Ange.
Ange wrote of the same episode, saving this for a long flight on Saturday, so comments might be later than usual. Business trips are a lot of work. And this was like months ago, so you're no rush, guys. It's okay. Sorry it has taken a while to respond. This is a crazy sort of episode covering a ton of stuff. So much I think I have forgotten so much of what was said. But here's what stuck. Number one, the Constantine show is much more Vertigo than New 52. I wonder how far back Mr. Fixit's Constantine experience
Patriots Goes, the Brujeria, Zed and the Resurrection Crusade, Gary Lester and the Nemoth Demon, Sister Marianne, the Pagan Witch turned Nun, and Newcastle is all early Constantine. There are concepts from the Alan Moore Swamp Thing and Jamie Delano Hellblazer runs, the first years of the character. My problem with the show is that it doesn't seem to know how to handle magic. Constantine has a house filled with magical objects, and he always has just the right trinket luckily on his person to save the day. 2, I think the DC TV universe is diverse and not streamlined because they are all on different networks with different sensibilities. Flash and Arrow clearly work together, and I feel are a love letter to the classic DCU. And my guess is Supergirl will align with these, as the Kara show is also being produced by the same lot of people. Gotham is the darker, grittier Fox take on the DCU. I like that it is more of a Jim Gordon show, but I like the Flash show much, much more. 3, I am more of a DC guy than a Marvel person, so when I first started to hear the general DC bashing in the middle of the show, I sort of rolled my eyes. Then listen to Frank review all the missteps that DC has done creatively, the poor leadership they have, and how they have alienated their top creators and fans. I had to slowly nod in agreement. I have lived through these things. I don't wear rose-colored glasses about DC at all, but I try to see some of the good things they have done. 4, lastly, Frank is right that the first 50 issues of Pad Supergirl is just a great mega arc going through the temptations of evil as well as redemption. You have to get past Supergirl being a pocket universe protoplasm merged with a Satan-worshipping teenager to become an angel on Earth. But once you accept that, immerse yourself in the mythology of that run and just take in the stories. It is simply fantastic. I read the whole run every couple of years. It has a beginning, middle, and end with great character progression. Hope I made it in time for listener feedback. Yes, quite so.
Yeah, you made it.
I'll just mention that the big rumor running around is that Marvel is doing the same fucking shit as DC. Just as DC's finally starting to let loose of the reins over their editorial, Marvel's hunkered down to such a degree that many of their top writers are just fleeing the company at this point. I just mentioned LA's Cott, who I don't think is going to be writing for them anymore. I think the last thing that he was doing was Winter Soldier, which I don't believe turned up on their all-new Marvel lineup that was released this month. I know that Kieron Gillen is left. Who else is left? Anyway, a lot of their big guys are leaving now, and I'm looking at that slate of books that are coming out after Secret Wars, and it seriously looks even less interesting than the New 52. Actually, considerably less interesting than the New 52. Did you see any of that stuff, Matt?
I did, and that's, I think we talked about this on Twitter briefly. It was like, I saw like the same 3 or 4 creators were writing a combined like 10 or 11 of those books.
Yeah, these are not
like
guys that were...
Bendis' name was on some of them. Some Ewing person was on.
Yeah, Al Ewing was writing a bunch of like their major Avengers stuff, and it's like, I know who Al Ewing is, sort of, kinda, but not really.
And enough to write multiple books a month? Like,
right, and an Avengers book specifically.
Yeah, bad mojo from that whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And by the way, the Amazing Spider-Man series that Dan Slott was doing with the Alex Ross cover, where they're turning him into a Tony Stark type character.
Yeah.
Dan Slott's
like Parker
proven it.
Industries with the Tony Stark style logo. Yeah.
See, Dan Slott has done some really interesting, daring things with Spider-Man that people have liked. That might be. Oh, he's pretty late into his run at this point, though. And the thing about getting late into your run is that's when you start doing kind of dumb shit. That really looks like Dan Slott doing the dumb shit at this point.
Well, something else that I'd heard. Apparently, I didn't realize they'd retconned that Tony Stark was adopted several years ago.
Oh yeah, and that Arno is the birth son of Maria and who's his dad's name? What's his dad's name? Howard. Yeah, Howard Stark. And that Tony was the adopted one. So I think that one of the things they're going to do is have him go look for his real parents, which makes me nauseous.
Stupidest shit ever. Like, I was reading some article and they mentioned something about how, hey, I wonder if they're going to retcon out. They retconned in that Tony Stark is adopted, and I just like, my brain froze when I read that sentence, and I'm like, for real? Like, who thought this was a good?
Well, you do know, too, that Arno Stark is the natural-born son of those two. Because they have to deal with Iron Man 2020 now that it's been 30-some-odd years since that character was created. So, didn't they just have an extended story arc in Batman where he's dealing with his long-lost brother as well? So, comics are just so fucking incestuous sometimes.
And they just make the same fucking dumb mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the Spider-Woman book, and she's, like, very pregnant on the cover of her comic. And you know one thing that always works out great in comic books? When you impregnate your superheroines?
Oh, yeah.
That's never a complete disaster that people make fun of on CBR and Newsarama and places like that forever. Yeah.
Your full male creative team's going to do a really good job of grasping grasping this one.
Yeah.
Which is it a full male creative team? I guess I have no fucking clue.
Yeah. Well, and also it's always tricky when you've got a hero with a kid, period. And then when it's the mom, there's all sorts of fucked up expectations from that character, and she immediately opens the door for like tons of fucking criticism. We've yet to show that we're capable of doing that type of story. And we certainly haven't shown it at the big two. We've seen that to a greater degree in independent comics, where a creator has a lot more say over how this situation is handled, rather than a new creative team coming in inevitably and retconning all that shit out, or just killing the fucking kid, turning it into a cheap means of, path of vengeance or that kind of bullshit. So all these decisions seem like some editor wanted to spice things up, or they wanted to get back to a place that takes things closer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and actually pussies out of story arcs. So I don't know what the hell they're doing.
Except the female Thor. I have no problem with this.
No, that's cool. I think that's really cool. I like that it's Jane Foster.
Does she have cancer?
Yeah, she's got like going through chemotherapy and stuff. So it's another situation where instead of it being a physically handicapped person like Don Blake, it's a person who's been compromised by disease, and she goes from being a human at one of their weakest possible points, most vulnerable possible points, to a goddess. So that works marvelously. Thor's the kind of character who needs that shaking up. We still gotta get Friol in here to defend Thor, because all we do is beat up on poor Thor. But Thor's not a character that I find compelling. I just don't find him very interesting. I find individual stories relating to Asgard or Thor's story arc interesting, but the character himself just does nothing for me. Ever. Has never done anything for me. There's not one story I can go, yeah, that's the great Thor story. There are great Thor stories that are great because they're great stories that happen to have Thor in them. I have never read a great story about the character of Thor where Thor was the reason why I was interested in it, and that Thor was the character I hooked into. So for me, if you're ever going to do a permanent major change like a gender swap, I think Thor would be one of the best possible candidates to do that and have it stick and have it be interesting. That's my take. I think it's great. I think it's a really interesting story, and I think it's one of those things amazing to me as the whole Superior Spider-Man thing, which I just thought was a wonderful hook, just a great way to fuck around with that character and do something interesting that you could still walk back if you needed to. But it's up there. I think it's a really good idea. And I think that Thor desperately needed something to change things up.
Yeah, again, we may just be Thor haters, I guess, maybe in some way, but it just seems like people are genuinely excited about that story. That's the one thing where nobody's...
Yeah.
I figured there would be more controversy to completely flipping the gender of a longtime Marvel superhero, except that Thor, and it also seems like that's the case. People just aren't that upset about it.
Yeah, well, and I don't hate Thor. I don't want to say him. I don't think it's honest. I just don't feel strongly enough about Thor for it to be an issue for me, for a sticking point.
All right, our next comment is from Kyle Benning on episode number 38, Marvel SHP MPDC, Spring Special 2015. I think the event Fixit was referring to was Cataclysm, not Catastrophe. Frank, I have to take you to task this time on your very Wikipedia-ish treatment of Superman's 90 stories. First of all, the year they decided to kill off Superman was because their initial story plan had to be scrapped at the last minute. They had already mapped out a full year, and had it culminating into the marriage of Superman and Lois. One problem, the Lois and Clark TV show had just launched, and Warner and DC decided they didn't want Superman and Lois to get married in both the comics and the TV show at the same time. What that meant for Superman's staff was back to the drawing board, and they had to find a way to put off the marriage long enough for the show to set up Lois and Clark's relationship and progress to the point of matrimony. So in comes Ordway's regular suggestion to kill him off, and they ran with it from there. Note that the death and funeral of a friend were the last two arcs of Jerry Ordway's long run, I believe 7 years, on writing and or drawing Superman post-crisis. Adventure Superman number 500 was his final issue. When Cyborg Superman threw Doomsday's body into space, he knew that Doomsday was still alive. In fact, he was banking his own future on it. He planted a chip containing his artificial intelligence program on Doomsday, knowing that it would be safe on the indestructible monster. Doomsday himself was a weapon whose origins come from Krypton, and that's why he was immediately headed for Metropolis. He was literally hell-bent on killing Superman, a Kryptonian, which he could sense, and registered as him as the most deadly of enemies because of his past being experimented on. Superman's death is still in New 52 continuity, at least in some capacity. Swamp Thing number 1 addressed it, and officially brought it into New 52 lore. In that issue, Superman meets up with Alec Holland to have a talk with Superman. Says something to the effect of, I know from experience how tough it is coming back from the dead. In addition to Batman and Green Lantern, the latest Legion continuity was also still intact. But the common thread there was that there was directly spinning out of John's Legion story arc between the Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis, and apparently anything John's touched was preordained to survive. It's hard to imagine now, 3.5 years later, since that there's no Legion of Superheroes book, but at the time of the New 52 launch, Legion was very popular. It had supported 2 titles with fairly high sales pre-Flashpoint, and that story literally continued right into the New 52, and again with 2 titles. The Legion lost book focus on a team that was trapped in its current timeline solely because of the events of Flashpoint. Meanwhile, the main Legion book continued plot threads from pre-Flashpoint and even acknowledged the whole paradox of time and reality disturbance of Flashpoint. DC then did a Legion Secret Origin miniseries in the early months of the New 52, initially to give Paul Levitz a chance to retell the Legion origin with no changes or straying from all the most Legion stuff he had written on and off for the past 3 to 4 decades. Legion stuff remained intact, all 3 books of it, thus making it impenetrable for new readers, and failing the mission Didio claimed the New 52 set out to accomplish. To Mac's point, I never thought Bob Harris would have been able to work in the comic industry again. Yeah, most people with common sense would think that. See, and I don't even read a lot of comics anymore, and I knew Bob Harris shouldn't be working in comic books. Damn it, I lost my spot. Okay, most people with common sense would think that. That shows just how stupid DC is right now. That arrogant moron is doing the same awful things at DC that he did at Marvel. Good to see that he learned from his colossal mistakes. Not. You get that? Scott Lobdell is responsible for writing the worst books of the New 52. He was writing Teen Titans and Superboy back when they launched the stories, crossed over, and the end result was 12 issues worth of shit story that literally could have been told in 2. I've not read a comic book worse than those 12 issues. Well, except for possibly for his New 52 Superman books. Don't forget Liefeld. He was writing and drawing 2 or 3 titles for his first year or so. It was literally is 90s Marvel's shitfest at DC right now. You guys are so right. When you're right, Mac. Oh, thanks, man. If you guys ever want to do an episode of Marvel superheroes focused solely on DC's missteps, please consider me for a guest spot. I could talk for hours about the shortcomings of Dan Didio and Bob Hairy Ass.
I want to say that the Marvel Superheroes podcast welcomes substantial, informative comments like Kyle Bennings. At the same time, I pulled a Mr. Fixit and I just sort of like laid back on the couch, closed my eyes, and tried to tune out as much of that as I possibly could. And I still managed to get a little headache over here on this side of the brain here. Here's the thing. When we were talking about the death of Superman, that was totally not planned at all. That whole episode was kind of a rambling mess. And people should know that when you're listening to one of the seasonal specials or the annuals, to just lower your expectations, because literally our worst material ends up in those things. They're like great big dumping grounds of extra shit that wasn't working out anyplace else. And we just had this long talk about Superman, and I was pulling as much information out of my ass as I possibly could, while at the same time making sure to make it clear that I think that 90s Superman comics, really 80s Superman comics, and for the most part 70s Superman comics, are fucking shit. And I don't think that DC's gotten Superman right, with the exception of the Lois and Clark marriage. I think that was a great wrinkle, and I think that was something that was very necessary and a mature step for DC, which is, of course, they've walked back because they're fucking immature dorks. I think that Superman was right in the Golden Age. He was right in the Silver Age. And he started going wrong in the Bronze Age. And throughout the entire modern age, people don't know what the fuck to do with Superman. So when you're giving me a whole bunch of information about where Superman was in the 90s, I don't fucking care. And I read a lot of those books. I read the majority of those books because I was such a DC fan. And so much of what happened in the DC universe went through Superman titles. And it was always a fucking chore because those books are fucking garbage. And I don't even understand how people continue to like Superman because those books were so fucking lame. So I don't care. I don't want to talk about Superman comics from that area, especially the minutia of it. I'm like stressed out just having to listen to all that. So, sorry, Kyle. Love you, but don't talk to me about Superman ever again, please, for the fucking love of God. All the rest of that was cool, though. What was the rest of it again? I was only, because the Superman shit was making it where I couldn't concentrate. Oh, yeah, the New 52 sucks, and more than likely Marvel Comics are going to be sucking now. So go read more independent books, and we'll crank out some more Underguides episodes and less Marvel superheroes, unless we're going to comment on cool old comics back when comics were good.
Whoa, dude, you went super curmudgeon-y.
Yeah, I don't understand. There are people who just love 90s Superman comics. Michael Bailey, like, at the forefront of that, because he's got a podcast of nothing but talking about Superman comics from Crisis on Infinite Earths through Infinite Crisis. And, it just makes me sad inside, because those books are so fucking mediocre. They're some of the most acceptable comics out there. They're journeyman-like, workman-like Clydesdale type comic books, but so unexceptional, so uninvolving, just boring as shit, and making Superman a character that such a fucking drag, just a drag to read that shit. And that's the shit that you hand to movie people and tell them, hey, turn this into a movie. They read that shit and they're like, who would want to fucking see a movie about this? And then you end up with goddamn Man of Steel because those comic books are what you're trying to reference. From John Byrne on, that stuff is shit. I think the closest Superman got to being any good in that the last 30, 40 fucking years was when Ed McGuinness was drawing it. And unfortunately, Jeff Loeb was writing that shit. So it's still fucking garbage. It's just goddamn gloriously drawn and colored garbage. So fuck Superman comic books in the modern age, and I have no fidelity to any information related to that, and that's why we won't do any major Superman fucking podcasts anytime in the near future, because I don't want to deal with this shit. I'd much rather just watch one of the fucking Donner movies or read some good Superman comics from before all this stupid shit where they decided they needed to make Superman realistic and more like a Marvel character, because Superman is only interesting when he's fucking super and doing real cool, fucking amazing shit. He's one of the greatest superheroes of all time. And so long as you're writing him as just another fucking schmuck, you're actually like, Superman was this character that suppressed the entire DC universe. And I've talked about it, how Marvel Comics, everybody gets a turn at being the top dog. Sometimes Ghost Rider's fucking popular. Sometimes Deadpool's popular. Sometimes Captain America's popular. Sometimes, hell, there was a time when Alpha Flight was fucking popular, okay? Everybody gets a turn. Everybody gets a shot. And a lot of guys get a chance to be the thing that people really want to talk about your company and people are really interested in. One of the reasons why DC Comics suck and why they were so frustrating to me, even as a fan for all those years, is that everything in the DC universe has to come down to Superman and Batman. And so everybody is measured against them, and nobody can be as good as Superman, and anybody who gets too far in the line gets beat up in a Superman comic book. They get fucked over. And same goes with Batman. Less so with Batman, strangely enough. But one of the things that people loved about the JLA comics was that it gave Superman and Batman an opportunity to make other heroes look like shit and make them look super fucking cool on a monthly basis. It was Superman, Batman, and their buddies for the most part. So when Superman's a shitty, boring character without any depth, and he's being drawn by artists that are pretty good but never like the real top artists at the particular point in time. So he's not visually interesting. He's not written particularly well. It's just like these guys who are carrying on, or they're coasting on the fact that they're writing Superman comics and doing as little as possible with the character while still sustaining 4 or 5 monthly titles. Okay, making sure there was a Superman title every fucking week. It was a total chore to read and totally dull. And I don't understand why people would ever think that stuff was worth bothering with, aside from like an enduring love of Superman that totally blinds them to how lame those books are. And then they're shitting on all the other DC characters and making sure that none of them are ever as good as Superman and Batman, making sure that anytime anybody steps out of line, these guys step up and go, no, we're still the greatest superheroes of all superheroes, and nobody else is even close to us because we're so fucking awesome. And then you read their books, they're fucking lame. So it makes the whole DC universe look like shit. It suppresses everybody. Nobody can fucking shine because it's all got to come down to Superman or Batman. I hate those attention whores. Fuck them. Ugh. Sorry. Hate Superman comics.
Whoa.
Especially modern age superhero comics.
Whoa.
Superman comics.
So like Superman pre-Crisis was better?
He was interesting. Yeah. He did weird.
He just did super weird
shit. Yeah, I mean, it's just way more interesting, cooler. I mean, all the stuff with Krypton is cool and interesting and goofy ass shit. Like him going back through time and trying to save Krypton over and over again. He always has to fail because that's how time works. So he can do all this fucking amazing shit, but he can't travel through time and save Krypton. Or like he loves his adoptive parents and they're the people who give him his moral center throughout his entire history. And then they die and he can't do shit about it. And in fact, the first time they died, it was his fault that they died and he could never fix that. Or how the one woman that he could fall in love with, because they did that big thing. I think, was it Robert Heinlein who wrote that article in Playboy where it's a Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex, where part of the reason why Superman's so weird in the Silver Age is because he can't get his fuck on because, he can't even masturbate without blowing holes in the Kent farm and shit. And so obviously he could never consummate his relationship with Lois Lane because he'd break her to pieces. So he finally finds a beautiful actress on the planet Krypton when he goes back through time, but of course she's doomed because he can't save her and he can't save Krypton. So it added that other layer. It's like, not only can he not save Krypton, but he can't get this one woman that he's fallen in love with off the planet before it blows up, no matter what he does, because it's just fate. No matter how powerful he is, no matter how super he is, fate says you're going to have tragedy, buddy. This is the shit that you can't fix, no matter how hard you try. You can go back through time as many times as you want to. You're never going to succeed at this thing. And I love stories like that. It definitely helps put things in perspective. And then all the Golden Age stuff is cool because he's the social justice crusader. So, that when you read about these bankers that, they fuck people out of all their retired retirement money, and then they have these little bullshit prison sentences, and they come back out and they're rich again. And he just grabs those guys by the ankle and runs them across power lines and shit like that. It's a total power fantasy where you're, as a common man, just wanting to see these people held accountable. And Superman did that shit, and that stuff's great too. So the sci-fi stuff is great, the tragedy stuff is great, the social justice aspect of it is great. And then by the time you get to the late 70s, early 80s, it's just total milquetoast, status quo. All the villains are established. We're not going to do anything interesting with any of these characters anymore. And Superman's got to be the guy who is just an unimpeachable paragon of mediocrity and white American suburban values. So that's when the books just aren't interesting anymore.
Wow.
And what sucks too is that their assholes are so tight about making Superman the greatest thing ever that he just can't even have decent villains. It's not that Superman doesn't have good villains in concept that have then good stories have been told of those villains. But even when you get a villain that gets too big for his purchase, like Mongol. Mongol is one of the coolest Superman villains ever created. He's appeared in some of the best Superman stories ever told. And the first thing they did post-Crisis was depower him to the point where he's just another fucking schmuck. He's just some guy who kind of looks like Darkseid, who gets into fights with Superman and loses badly. And then you're like, well, no wonder nobody cares when this guy shows up anymore. He went from being this badass, whole teams of people would get thrown at this guy, and he'd still be beating their asses. And Superman actually had to use his smarts to beat this guy. He couldn't overpower him because this guy was at least as equal, if not as better. And then the first thing they do is they counterman that, and they just make him another, punching bag. He's a big yellow punching bag.
Well, because if he can be Superman, then that means he's the most powerful person.
Right, and they can't allow for that. So
that screws up their whole hierarchy, and everything's fucked up.
Yeah, even the Spectre. They had a great story in the early 80s where the Spectre basically says, look, you can't, he's going to have to pass through heaven to save Supergirl, who's been flung out into space. And Spectre basically says, whoa, buddy, you can't go there. And so they fight and they do all this kind of stuff, and Superman can't do anything to the Spectre in the story. So in the end, what happens is Kara passes through heaven and comes back out again, and Spectre explains, hey, look, she was in a coma. She had no idea she was ever there. You can't, as a living person, go into there because you're never going to come out again, but she could just sort of pass through, and if you had a little bit of faith, we could have saved ourselves a bunch of trouble. Just let this happen. There's some things that are beyond even your power. Whereas in the post-Crisis universe, he grabbed the Spear of Destiny and almost killed Spectre in his own book. So, and Superman shouldn't even really be handling magical objects because it should be fucking him up. But no, he grabs a spear that they stabbed Christ with, and it goes after Spectre, the wrath, the embodiment of God's wrath. So even the Spectre can't be more powerful than Superman the way they get it set up.
Yeah, that's whack.
Yeah, so it just makes him a total bore because he can't be challenged by anything.
There's nobody like that.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
Marvel,
That's the whole point. That's why I hate Superman comics so much, and why the entire DC universe suffers because of their unwavering fidelity to two characters that have to be better than everybody else at everything. With Superman being the most emblematic of that. Because at least Batman's been shown as fallible at different points in time, and at least they managed to tell interesting stories with Batman because of the natural limitations of him being a human being. But Superman, they just fucking no. The kid gloves are always on with that character.
Well, but it seems like now at least they're making it so he doesn't fly anymore, right? And he wears a freaking t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah, that's horrible. I hate all that too.
Isn't that like way too far the other way?
Yeah, it's way too far the other way, and it's just temporary. But my main issue is, one of the things that you could lob as a criticism of Wonder Woman is that she steals, not only does she have a poor relationship with her supporting characters like the Donna Troy Wonder Girl, the Cassandra Sandsmark Wonder Girl, but she steals their best bits. The big thing with Wonder Girl was that she could fly, where Wonder Woman at best could sort of float on air currents, but she couldn't fly. She needed her invisible plane for that. So that's what made the two characters different. It's like the only thing that Wonder Girl could do that made her more powerful than Wonder Woman was the flight. So they gave Wonder Woman flight, and she doesn't need her invisible plane anymore, one of the most iconic elements of that character. And now Wonder Girl doesn't have the one thing that makes her distinct and different from Wonder Woman. In the case of Cassie Sandsmark, she seemed fated to gain these powers where she should have been just like a normal girl, but she keeps lucking into all this superpower. In particular, Zeus himself bequeathing a ton of power to her so she could run around and do cool stuff. She gets her own little lasso that shoots electricity. And you're like, well, why would this one character get this? And it turns out, she's the illegitimate daughter of Zeus. So that's why she gets this special treatment. And that's cool. So what do they do in the New 52? They reveal that Wonder Woman wasn't made out of clay. She's just made out of Zeus fucking Hippolyta. So she's always stealing the shit from her own supporting cast, and then she doesn't have good relationships with those characters that work. And then you take Superman, they created that Superboy character, but there's always been a bit of an estrangement because Superboy didn't exist prior to the 90s. He was just Superman as a boy, stories of Superman as a boy. So then they created a whole new character. Really? Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so before that, Superboy was just Superman as a boy, as a young man, as a teenager. And then they removed that aspect from Superman. It's one of the things that made Superman lamer, is that he no longer was Superboy. After that was an essential part of his continuity, and from which a lot of things were generated that became part of Superman's main lore, came out of Superboy stories, including Bizarro. So they take that away from Superman, and then they create an entirely separate character named Superboy, and it's a clone of Superman, and they do all these stories with him, but for me, one of the most interesting areas was when he's got it grown up a little bit and he started running around in like jeans and a black t-shirt with a Superman symbol on it. So now Superman looks exactly like Superboy used to look. So he's stealing his shit from his own supporting character.
It's like they dry run it on lesser characters, and when it's shit, it works.
Yeah.
Let's do it with Superman.
Yeah, and so even the supporting characters can't keep anything that's theirs. It all has to come back to the main character. They just exist to create IP that can be stolen by the main hero. So yeah, that's another thing I hate. Plus, John Romita Jr. is still drawing him, and John Romita Jr. has no business drawing Superman. And it looks like they're turning Superman into a character that John Romita Jr. can draw instead of having him continue to draw Superman.
That is weird. What a weird situation. Hey, did we just do a DC Bloodlines podcast?
Sort of, kind of. I don't curse on the DC Bloodlines, though, so.
We'll just bleep them out. You can take this comment and your response and my comment with your responses and just...
We'll see what happens.
All right.
So, hey, that was Kyle Benning. You want to do Siskoid?
Yeah. Okay, this is Siskoid's comment on episode number 39, Top 10 Avengers, Age of Ultron tie-in. And he says, my top 10 favorite Avengers, I'm not including Avengers Academy or Young Avengers characters. 1, Hawkeye. 2, Hank Pym. I don't even care which version. 3, Tigra. 4, Black Knight. 5, Captain America. 6, Mockingbird. 7, Wasp. 8, Hercules. 9, Iron Man. Rhodey version. Sorry, Tony. 10, Spider-Woman. Jessica Drew. So Funny. And Secret Avengers. There are other Avengers that I love, perhaps more, but not as Avengers. She-Hulk is a member of the Fantastic Four, and I don't believe I don't believe in the whole everyone's an Avenger. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Wolverine should never be considered Avengers. A similar movie list, as represented in Avengers movies as of Age of Ultron, would go like Hulk, Cap, Widow, Hawkeye. A huge move forward with Age of Ultron. Thor, Iron Man, Quicksilver, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Nick Fury. 10 worst Avengers? I think Frank has it right. It's less about being a bad character than about not being appropriate as an Avenger. And if I go for only lame characters and not inappropriate ones that I can't consider Avengers, I'd have to add Thing and Moon Knight in there as well, despite my great love for Avengers West Coast and or West Coast Avengers. I also name in no particular order Gilgamesh, Star Fox, Cersei, Mantis, Stingray, Red Hulk, Jocasta, Sentry, Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel. I love her later career though. Ares. Anyway, it's off the top of my head, and considering I didn't read much Avengers after 1990.
I like the top 10 list. It's interesting. That's totally the kind of list I would expect from Siskoid, because he's not going for a bunch of obvious people in there. It's a nice mix of different characters. I liked Cersei as an Avenger. I think that came up previously, so I have to point that out. I can understand ruling out Moon Knight, because that's ill fit to my thinking as well. But I kind of think the Thing works, because the Thing with Marvel 2-in-1, he teamed up with so many other characters and had it work. And it wasn't the way that Spider-Man teamed up with people in Marvel Team Up, because with him, he was still always the outsider, the loner, the loser, who was hanging out with a more prominent hero, even though in comic book terms, they were always less prominent than Spider-Man for the most part. Where with the Thing, it was much more of him working with peers. It's just like, oh, okay, this is the guy I'm going to work with to beat this guy. This is the guy I'm going to work with to beat this guy. So for me, he fits better as an Avenger. I don't have a problem with that. He doesn't have to be in the Fantastic Four. And I like She-Hulk as an Avenger and as a member of the Fantastic Four. So if they swap out, one's on one team, one's on the other team, I'm perfectly contented with that.
Yeah, I thought the lists were cool too. Very interesting.
I don't understand not liking the Monica Rambeau Captain Marvel as an Avenger, though.
Yeah, that's a lot of that Roger Stern stuff too. Oh, I like all that stuff.
Yeah. So let's see. Ange wrote the same episode. Debating listening to reviews before I see it, which will probably be upcoming weekend. Boy, we're fucking late getting this thing out, aren't we?
It's been a while.
As a DC guy, I have rarely read the Avengers on a steady basis. Outside of the rare individual issue bought off the rack for 30 cents in my youth, my runs are, and please don't laugh, number 1, Jeff Johns, Scott Collins Avengers. Number 2, Bendis Finch New Avengers. 3, current Hickman New Avengers. 4, Byrne West Coast Avengers. Of those, I think the Byrne run is clearly the best. The Hickman stuff is interesting in scope. The Bendis stuff was interesting in the team makeup being odd, but the Byrne stuff felt like the Avengers. Anyway, I would like to hear at some point the top 10 Avengers villains. Outside of Kang, is there anyone that is purely an Avengers villain? I am surprised Tigra didn't get mentioned given this show's love of the cat.
Avengers villains that are solely Avengers villains.
Well, I think that Fox has proven that Kang can't be considered a sole Avengers villain since
he's
they
Dr. Doom.
retconned the Rama Tut thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the Doom connection. It's that he's supposed to be Rama Tut, who appeared in Fantastic Four.
That's right.
Yeah. So which is something they could easily fix by retconning that part out. Maybe make Immortus Rama Tut, and then Immortus and Kang are two different characters. That's the way you can weed around that.
And those Perez era Avengers, that's all coming up right now too, which is super weird.
The stuff you're reading, the Avengers stuff,
where they're dealing with Immortus and talking about Rama Tut and talking about Kang and how Rama Tut's past, Immortus's future Kang, but a divergent Kang. Kang is so fucked up, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have a story with Kang that's just straightforward. So anyway, Avengers villains that are just solely Avengers villains. You got like guys like Korvac.
Yeah. Oh, well, they tie them in more closely with Guardians of the Galaxy, but that only happens because they appeared in Avengers, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they're Avengers villains. My brain's not working right now.
Graviton was an Avengers villain, right?
Sure.
Okay. So you're the Avengers guy. But it's pretty late at night. So
it's 2:47 a.m.
Let's give the guy a break.
Yeah. Hey, give me a break. We'll do plenty of top 10 lists in the future, and we will definitely read more Avengers stuff in the future.
And as far as Tigra, I like Tigra well enough, but she's not on the top list of anything I've ever done.
Oh.
And I'm more interested in Hellcat, who was created through the cat, than I am in Tigra. And Hellcat's a defender, not an Avenger.
All right, moving on to the next comment. It's from CJ. He says, agree or not, best Frank rant ever. Good stuff. What was that from?
My anti-Spider-Man rant, I think.
Oh, yeah, that was good stuff. Our next comment's from Simon Donovan. Nice podcast this week, guys. We had the Star Wars trailer in the UK. No Ant-Man trailer, though. Really? They had the Star Wars trailer in the UK? Showings of Avengers? That's crazy. Just having a catch-up on the episodes. Listen to How Did This Get Made podcast. Punisher movie episode has the director's story. Interesting. Can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. Not as predictable as I thought. Keep up the good work, guys.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but just to reiterate, it's possible that episode of How Did This Get Made was the first podcast I ever listened to. I don't recall listening to one before that one, and I think that came out before Fire and Water. If not, then it was the first non-Fire and Water podcast I ever listened to.
We actually listened to that podcast while we were repairing your car, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It was quite entertaining.
That was a cool episode, yeah. Although it oversold a shitty movie.
Yeah. All right, the next comment is from Keith G. Baker. He says, catching up, great episode as always, usually free-flowing language. Didn't get the one bleep. Censorship sucks, Hawkeye's a dick. That censorship was because we basically had spoiled that Hawkeye had a wife.
Yeah, and we wanted to keep it as spoiler-free.
That was very
on that movie, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, look, it's been out, folks.
Yeah.
Hawkeye's got a wife. Deal with it.
Yeah. If you didn't see the movie by now, what's your problem?
Yeah. If you hear anything bleeped in the Marvel Superheroes podcast, it's not for cursing. There's a different method to the madness.
Yeah. It's always the real name of somebody that we don't want to name, or some overly identifying marker that I want to conceal.
Right.
In the 2015s, the internet is a scary fucking place. I try to protect us as much as possible, even when we're falling short of protecting ourselves.
Well, we want to protect you guys, too. Look, the movie had just come out.
Yeah.
Just come out.
Yeah.
So we didn't need to be dropping bombs. It kind of takes some shit out of the movie, if that's the case.
Yeah.
The next comment's from Count Dracula. He says, can one be too lazy to write but still record and edit a 10-minute message on GarageBand?
And cue that as well.
Hey, Rolled Spine folks, it's your wild agent of Marvel, Count Druncula, responding to the Superblog Team-Up crossover top 10 episode of the Marvel Superheroes podcast. Normally I would write my response, but after doing a podcast for so long, you start to realize that writing sucks in every form. First, I want to say that Frank's breathy introduction to that episode, like a 900 sex chat number, I don't know what that was, but I don't ever want to hear it again. On the other hand, you guys did save the episode a minute later when Frank and Max started doing the saxophone melody. That was wonderful. I cracked up. I also cracked up really hard when Max started comparing Mantis's origin to Nicki Minaj. That was beautiful. In my own kind of way, I have to respond by coming up with my own top 10 lists to compare to yours. So right off the bat, my top 10 Avengers, based on the same criteria that Mac had, how these characters fare as Avengers. The first honorable mention would be Beast. He is a classic Avengers character. He's great for the team, but he is one of the most important, most iconic X-Men characters, and I don't think you can have that status and also be considered one of the top 10 Avengers. Sorry, I nixed that. next honorable mention, next runner-up is one that I just put up there just because of the potential. I wish she was more involved with the Avengers. I wish she was more iconic, and that is She-Hulk. I love the character. I wish she could be the Hulk's representation in the Avengers family, because I don't think the Hulk belongs on the team long term. He's just not a team player that way. He's good as a founder, but he doesn't work. I think She-Hulk has the people skills to bring that strength, that presence of the Hulk as an A-lister, while still getting along with other characters. And the last honorable mention is Spider-Woman, the Jessica Drew version. I think she was probably the best part of Brian Michael Bendis' run on the Avengers titles, was elevating her. She feels like an older established character, and she feels like she really could have been introduced to the team earlier and would have gelled well with the sort of the shooter era. Moving on to the actual top 10. Number 10 would be Captain Marvel, alias Ms. Marvel, or Warbird, or whatever she's been called. I really like the character. I think I'll always think of her in her classic kind of black costume with the open thighs and open shoulders and the red sash. I get that they changed it to make it a little more practical and a little bit less sex object-y, and I like the new costume too. Number 9, Black Panther, one of my favorite Marvel characters. It just feels like for as much as he has been involved at certain crucial times, he always sort of gotten... Black Panther feels like he can have the technology and the brilliance of Iron Man, the physical skills and the leadership skills of Captain America, and the sort of ruler from an alien culture that Thor has. But instead of replacing all three of those guys with Black Panther, he sort of gets overshadowed by them. But he's still a great Avenger. Number 8 is Hank Pym. He's always there in one form or another, whether it's Ant-Man or Giant Man or Yellow Jacket or Goliath. He's one of the founders of the Avengers. He belongs on that list. It's hard to imagine the Avengers without him. He's as disruptive as he sometimes is. Number 7, Wasp. Similar reasons. She's one of the founding Avengers. Been one of the leaders of the Avengers. She's one of those who should be always sort of considered for an Avengers lineup. Number 6, Thor. And even though I do agree that he feels like one of the big three of the Avengers, and he should have that status, he deserves to have that status when you're thinking about his contributions as an Avenger, he may have had his best moments outside of the book, and he's just always written as to have an excuse to leave. So I agreed with what you were saying there. Number 5, Scarlet Witch, and number 4, Vision. Again, they always just belong with the team. They're just there. They're just present. Number 3, Hawkeye. Like Max said, his best moments, his perennial moments are as an Avenger. He led Avengers West Coast. It's hard to imagine the team without him. Number 2, Iron Man, and number 1, Captain America. It feels like the Avengers was a group of heroes that kind of came together. It was a team-up for the first couple issues. But in issue 4, when they brought Captain America aboard, that's when it wasn't a team-up. That's when it was a team. So he's always going to be number 1. And take away from that, my top 4, Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Vision, were the 4 playable characters that you could use in the Avengers arcade game. That was at the Walmart that I would go to and visit and play that game all the time. Good times. Moving on, top 10 Marvel Cinematic Universe Avengers. Number 10, I would put the Falcon just because I like this character more than War Machine or Nick Fury or Maria Hill or whoever else you could potentially put up there. Number 9, Quicksilver, just because he didn't do quite as much as Scarlet Witch. Number 8, Scarlet Witch, just because she did a little bit more than Quicksilver. Number 7 is The Vision. He stole the show and he was great in Age of Ultron. But looking at the top 6, it's going to be the original 6, mostly because of their exposure across more films than the others. And that would be number 6, Hawkeye. Really sort of underserved in the Avengers, although I think he was used pretty well for what he was. Considering Joss kind of had to introduce him brand new in the Avengers. I doubt many people remembered him from Thor. Putting him as a villain or as a bad guy sidekick lackey in the first Avengers at least gave him screen time and made you think about him and gave him a focus. And then he stole the show in a lot of ways in Age of Ultron. They really made amends for that, and he got some of the funniest lines and some good scenes. It was a nice treat. Number 5, Black Widow. I think Joss really had a good handle on her, and Joss likes to write strong women, so he did a good job with her in the first Avengers. They did even better in The Winter Soldier, and I thought she was handled really well in Age of Ultron too. I liked her romantic subplot with Banner up to a certain point, but I'll get to that when you actually do your reviews of the movie. And number 4, Thor. They've demonstrated that he's a heavy hitter, but in the 2 Avengers movies, I'm not sure Joss had enough for him to do, and certainly his part got really truncated in Age of Ultron. He did have a much longer subplot that got cut. And number 3 was the Hulk. The Hulk stole the show. He got the biggest laughs and biggest surprises out of the first Avengers film. And still some really good moments in Age of Ultron, but not quite as many. And number 2 would be Iron Man, just because it's been his franchise and his universe for so long. I mean, it's hard to see anybody, but I really have seen over the last couple movies of Captain America stepping out from behind Iron Man's shadow. And Frank and I have argued about this because I think Captain America was really underserved and probably used the worst in the Avengers movie. I don't think Joss Whedon had a good handle on the character. His jokes were flat. He didn't have any really interesting moments in the action sequence. And at the end, when the team came together in the first Avengers, Iron Man had to give him control and had to say, call it Captain. Where the Avengers failed for me was that Joss Whedon did not explain who Captain America was in the 21st century or why the world still needed him. The Russo brothers did that with the Winter Soldier. They answered those questions completely. This is who he is in the modern day world, and this is why the world still needs him. And that was taken even further in Age of Ultron, where we saw him step out from behind Tony's shadow and actually take control and take leadership of the team. And probably my favorite Captain America moment. It's a subtle moment, but it's in Age of Ultron. You really have to be looking for it, but it's, without spoiling too much, at the end when Sokovia needs to be evacuated, Captain America is literally the last man on the transports. He waits until the very last second to evacuate. That is Joss Whedon getting Captain America. And I love that moment, and that's why I think he is the best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Avengers. As far as Frank's list went about the worst Avengers, I can't argue. I completely agree with his list. I might change the order a little bit, but I think he got that pretty much. So I came up with my own top 10 list, which is the top 10 villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And number 10, probably surprise a lot of people, is Loki. For being in 3 movies, almost 4, this version of Loki hasn't done a whole lot for me. I still don't think he's been played up to his potential. Tom Hiddleston is a very charismatic and gives a mesmerizing performance, but I think the character hasn't been written that great. He hasn't felt like a devious trickster god. He's felt petulant, he's felt jealous, kind of weaselly, and he plays tricks, he casts illusions, and he manipulates people, he takes control of people, but I don't see a big end game coming from it. He doesn't feel like a real devious schemer, just a liar, and that's not Loki. That's not Loki up to his full potential. Number 9, Emil Blonsky / the Abomination from The Incredible Hulk. Even though dude looked like they were just ripping off Doomsday from The Death of Superman, he looked cool. I really liked Tim Roth and his sort of devolution throughout the movie, and how crazy he started going, how addicted to the serum he started getting. He was fun to watch. I wish they would bring the Abomination back. Number 8, Thanos, because he hasn't done anything yet except make threats and sit around, so hopefully we'll see more of that potential. Number 7, Arnim Zola. Even forgetting his little performance in the first Avenger, Captain America, if you just reduced him to his scene as a monitor screen in The Winter Soldier, that was enough fan service to make me giddy, and I loved it. Number 6, Obadiah Stane / the Ironmonger from the first Iron Man film. Surprised me because I never really knew what to expect from that character. When I saw the movie, I didn't know if they were going to actually play him out as a villain or if he was just going to be a father figure. So when he did his villainous turn, I was a little bit surprised, even though I knew his story in the comics. And number 5, from Iron Man 2, Justin Hammer. Just such a fun performance that you just chewed up, and it was funny. Never really saw him as a real serious threat, but he was still funny to watch. Number 4, even from his short little time, I loved Ulysses Klaue in Age of Ultron. I liked Andy Serkis. I couldn't imagine him playing this type of role, but he did great, and I cannot wait to see him again in Black Panther. Number 3, Joss Whedon. I'm sorry, I mean Ultron. I get those two confused. Yeah, Ultron. He was scary. He was crazy. He was scary because he was crazy. And I think sometimes he was written a little bit inconsistently, and that's why he's not my number 1. Number 2, General Ross from The Incredible Hulk. I really liked how William Hurt just, again, chewed that scenery and delivered that character as the foil for The Incredible Hulk. And I'm so glad because they just announced today that General Ross will be appearing in Captain America Civil War. And that warms my heart because Marvel seemed like they were distancing themselves from that movie after recasting the character of Banner. So it's nice to see that he will be back. And number 1, the Winter Soldier. Surprised me, but just on a purely visual level, he comes across as such a silent stalker force of nature when he's attacking Nick Fury and then when he's attacking Captain America and Black Widow and the Falcon on the overpass. It's probably my favorite action sequence in the Winter Soldier out of all of the Marvel movies. And he just did such a good part with that. And I love his sort of catharsis at the end with Cap at the end of Winter Soldier. Great stuff. So even though I don't think he will be a villain going forward, he is my number 1 favorite villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, all right, great episodes as always. That was my response. And here is your Wild Agent of Marvel, Count Druncula, signing out. Signing off? Checking out? Whatever. Fuck you guys.
I don't know if you ever listened to that, but we have we can listen to that right quick if you want to. It's 15 minutes long, though.
Fuck no. We'll listen to it some other time.
We'll listen to it some other time. Matt W. wrote, "Hello, gentlemen of Marvel Superheroes Podcast. Just recently discovered your podcast and listening from the beginning. You guys speak well and avoid the tendency to fanboy rage, which is greatly appreciated, unless we're talking about Superman. But furthermore, you genuinely love comics. Overall, it's fun to hear the general conversation about various Marvel characters. It's such a big universe and so much. It's just fun. So I like your podcast a lot. Let me change direction and say I'm not as much a part of the comics. I grew up on the TV cartoons, and only in recent years have I gained an appreciation for comics. My heart still enjoys the cartoons, specifically that with each series you get a different interpretation of each character. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to catching up to your recent podcasts." And I like the animation too. I think,
and he's definitely right. You definitely get different interpretations with each iteration of the cartoon, for sure.
Yeah, see, one of the things that's refreshing with cartoons.
What comment was this on?
I think it was just a general comment. I think it might have been on an uncommon source. I'm not sure if that was a blog post or what that was. But one of the things I think is cool about comics, and I might have been a little bit more itchy about fidelity to the comic books when I was a kid, but now that there's so much superhero media out there, if somebody wants to take a different approach to it, I'm less judgmental about that. I like seeing some of the different interpretations. Sometimes they do good things. They make smart choices. Sometimes you got to get away from the comics. Sometimes, and a lot of times outside media have influenced the comics in positive ways. So as long as they're true to the cores of the characters, or they take characters that have loosey-goosey cores that you're not really sure what's supposed to be the appeal of that character, and they figure out a way of making you like that character, that's great. And obviously, I think the majority of superhero lore is going to come from movies and TV shows now. I don't think there are enough people that read comic books for that to be significant. I think the comic books are an opportunity to get ideas ideas for the shows. So that's just the way they're going to be taken on at this point. So I think it's great to go back to the roots and look at the comic book stories. You have to embrace that. And I think we do that because we talk a lot about the movies, and we will talk about more of the animation as well in the future. We still don't have like a strong agenda here in terms of like, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. A lot of times this is sort of a catch-as-catch-can podcast, and sometimes we're going to talk about TV shows, sometimes we're going to talk about comics. We find it all to be valid and all of it's worth discussing.
Yeah, well, and I gotta say, back in my comic book days, I was freaking adamant. Continuity, maintain continuity. Because back then, shit didn't... like, Crisis on Infinite Earths was the only major universe reboot ever, right? Like, we were all reading contiguous comic books, shitty writing here and there, retcons here and there, right? Different story. Well, since I stopped reading comic books, we got Heroes Reborn. I mean, stuff gets rebooted like every year now.
Yeah.
And shit gets retconned in and out, and it turns out you're on a different universe, a parallel universe, and you're on Earth 616 and 712 and burp, burp, burp. So you kind of get desensitized to it. Like I said, I read that Tony Stark had been adopted at some point. Look, now I know that'll get retconned out at some point. It just doesn't matter. It's going to go away eventually. And it probably will be with this whatever all new, all happy Marvel. It'll probably be, you can't let it bother you as much anymore because it changes too often now. It's just a different environment. Whereas, like I said, back then I was fucking, what are you talking about, man? It's one solid record. You know what I mean? It was one guy's life I've been reading about all these years, and now it's just it's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, and just the time catches up with you, because in the 60s, Marvel referenced stuff from the 40s, but they didn't have strong continuity with the 40s comics. So throughout the 1960s, you had Stan Lee and a whole group of a bullpen of talented creators who were telling their stories and were able to keep it consistent enough to where it formed an actual universe of stories, because they were all generated from a handful of people that were the prime architects. Then in the 1970s, you had people that loved what they were doing and had fidelity to that. And even though they did different stuff, they always held on to that continuity. Once you get to the 80s, it starts to get a little bit looser. But again, you got that strong strand that kept everything connected. By the 90s, you had a lot of people that didn't have respect for what had come before them, who were trying to do something new and bold and sell a bunch of comic books, or who just didn't care and weren't terribly competent. And they're not trying to remember 10 years worth of comics. They're trying to remember 30 years worth of comics. So by the time you get to the 2000s, you've got 40 years worth of continuity. Some of it's terrible. Some of it's stuff that you just want to forget about and should never been put in place in the first place. People are just going to take more and more liberties the more decades pass. And that's only true of Marvel. But DC was not created to be a frickin' universe. It was a bunch of individual titles, some of which connected to one another, but to a large degree, they had nothing to do with each other until the 60s, when they started trying to emulate Marvel. And even then, it was a slow process. In the 1970s, half the Justice League suddenly became ersatz Avengers because they borrowed the personalities directly from Marvel comics and implanted them in the characters, whether it suited them or not. So DC never really had a strong continuity. It was stronger post-crisis than it ever had been previously. And just sometimes that was to their benefit and sometimes to their detriment. One of the tragedies for me is that by the 2000s, it seemed like DC had finally started to get away from the repression that the crisis continuity had impressed upon them, and allowing themselves to reach back to earlier continuities and play around with stuff from decades before them and play with them in a new modern context. And I thought that DC was finally starting to embrace its full history and getting the full advantage of the wonder of that universe and the span of that universe. And then the New 52 happened, and they made it as tiny as possible. They made their universe as small and as narrow and as non-inclusive as possible. And now Marvel seems to be doing very much the same thing after they've played out their continuity for so long that at this point you kind of have to dump some stuff and make some changes. If I'm watching a movie and I'm enjoying a movie and then I try to read a comic book and the comic books are sucking, then why would I favor the original medium even if it's the inferior one? I'd much rather just go watch a movie where they have a lot less to sift through, a lot less continuity, and they just pick the good stuff and they represent that in a live action film. I'm going to enjoy that a hell of a lot more than most modern comic books. So yeah, I mean, you know, you just got to go where find your joy, as Shag would put it. You've got to find where you're actually being entertained and not be worried about whether or not it's a biblical canon.
Right. Excellent. Well put. All right, next comment's from Jason Martinez. He says, listen to the top 10 Avengers, an Age of Ultron tie-in. Our next comment is from Professor Riptide. He says, fun top 10 episode, gents. Thank you, Professor Riptide. Our comment after that is from Martin Gray. He says, on the latest Marvel Superheroes podcast, what is this Merry Marvel Marching Society of which you speak?
Spelled M-A-R-Y. It's a gay joke.
Yeah. Which, thank you to the U.S. Supreme Court, now we can have Merry Marvel Marching Societies.
Indeed. Well, except that political correctness says we shouldn't call gay folks marries anymore. I think that's one of those ones where we as straight guys can't actually say marry.
Oh, no,
so
definitely not.
I
This
need to go
entire
back.
segment-
We're going to cut this whole thing.
entire segment
Yeah.
is going to be edited out. We apologize if we've offended anybody. The next comment is from Count Drunkula. He says, "What? Post-credit stinger on latest hashtag MSHP podcast. Mind blown."
Yeah, that's when I announced the DC podcasts that have been taking the place of the Marvel podcast for the last several weeks. Sorry. I know people really miss the Marvel Superheroes podcast. I can't compete with us as a group, so.
It's all good. Our next comment is from Kyle Benning on episode number 40, Marvel's Age of Ultron 2015. Half listened to Avengers 2 episode now. Don't know if someone pointed this out yet to you guys, but Veronica is an Archie joke.
Which also popped up in that podcast.
Yeah. The comment after that is from Siskoid on that same podcast. He says, "A lot of nitpicks there, you guys, but after Frank ruined Guardians, I don't know what I was expecting. I spilled a lot of virtual ink on the Black Widow gate, so I won't do it again. As for the rest, my biggest agree is with Frank on how it seemed like a response to Man of Steel. I had the same glow. Biggest disagree was probably any notion that continuity implants to coming Infinity War were any good. I don't know if we said they were any good. I'm just saying they were necessary, for better or for worse. They keep taking me out of the movie, so I really have zero use for Infinity Gauntlet bullshit and Marvel during those days. It's just a distraction to me. Stick to the story. Don't sell me a movie that's 3 years off. It was too full, and I think if they'd cut some of that Infinity crap out, there would have been more room for things that were glossed over, like Ultron's motivation.
Or they could spend more time on the farm doing melodrama.
Yeah.
I want to see the 3.5, 4 hour cut of the movie, and I'd like to judge it based on those merits. So I want them to do a rogue cut of Avengers 2 and see how that works out.
Yeah, I feel like
I really felt like we missed stuff. There was just too many pieces dangling there that didn't connect to anything that you waited to pay off and never paid off.
But the good news is that like we talked about the other day, I was right. The movie didn't really do that well.
No, it did well. It's not at all poorly. It's just underperformed. And you were right. It did underperform.
It underperformed. I'm just saying it underperformed. Marvel knows
it's only the number 2 film of the year.
Marvel knows it underperformed.
Yeah.
And I think that they're going to listen to some of the criticisms, and hopefully that will make the next films better.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately is much Infinity Gauntlet bullshit that you don't want to read.
Well, that, and also it gives them an opportunity to receive a bunch of notes from Disney executives, so it could actually get much worse from here instead of better.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
So do we want to address the Black Widow stuff?
Not tonight.
Okay, well, just in brief, there's only one major female character throughout a whole bunch of Marvel movies, and it's easy to put way too much weight on this one character, especially a character that's an established murderess who worked for the frickin' Soviet Black Ops organization. So let's not take the whole "we're both monsters" thing too frickin' literally. She fucking set fire to a hospital somewhere that Loki discussed.
Look.
So she is a monster. It's got nothing to do with whether or not she can be impregnated.
Oh my gosh, people.
I think it's more about somebody had controlled her life so thoroughly and so transformed her that she no longer felt like she was a 100% human being and could relate to the damage that Bruce Banner had done to himself in his pursuit of gamma radiation technology. So that's what they were talking about. It's got nothing to do with you reading too much into one line of dialogue. And I'm sorry, where were you fuckers when Gamora was getting shit upon on Guardians of the Galaxy? I had feminists pissed at me because I was pointing out problems with that character. And I think that that's a character that should have been a lot more competent, a lot more agency should have been allowed to that character, afforded that character. Black Widow is a human who hasn't even gotten a proper widow sting after 4 fucking movies or whatever, and she's an established murderous assassin. What the fuck are you expecting from this poor character?
Yeah, well,
let her fucking be.
Well, and then people go down this rabbit hole of, well, she's not on any merchandise, and then you realize Hawkeye's not on any of that merchandise either.
Yeah, because they're not as interesting and they're not as strong and they don't have as many cool powers. I hope we're going to see a lot of Scarlet Witch though, because that chick is fucking badass.
Well, and then you also realize, oh, hey, you're expecting to have Scarlett Johansson's face as Black Widow, in which case they have to pay Scarlett Johansson for all those shitty $9.99 t-shirts at Walmart. It ain't gonna happen. You're gonna put Captain America in a mask, and you're gonna put Iron Man in a mask, and and Hulk, who's just big and green. You can do that, and that's fine, but you have to pay these freaking actors. It's not because they're trying to oppress a woman character. There are dollars involved.
Maybe. I'm not sure, because I think
then why isn't Hawkeye on any of these freaking t-shirts either? It's because they want the big 3. That's why.
Yeah, I think that's probably probably more true is that they want the big three.
Sometimes
and here's the thing too. I'm sitting here having this conversation in a DC shirt that I bought. Don't buy very many DC shirts because it's usually got freaking Superman or Batman on them, and I don't want to promote Superman or Batman, Green Lantern, or the Flash. There's a serious sausage factory issue with DC Comics where they're trying to push a Justice League that is just those 4 characters at the exclusion of everyone else, including and especially pointedly Wonder Woman. But I'm wearing this shirt and it's a bunch of style guide images of various characters, and we're gotten super obscure too. We've got fucking El Dorado is on here. The version of Orion that had a Manny Faces twisting top thing. There's no women on the shirt that I'm wearing right now. I bought it because I liked that licensing material too much. I liked that so many of the heroes had big smiles on their faces, but I'm keenly aware that I'm wearing a shirt without a single freaking woman on it. There's a much bigger problem than just a representation in a movie. This is something systemic, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of bitching. I don't have a problem with them bitching about the lack of Scarlet Witch, of Black Widow. Hell, both. You bitch about it, and hopefully they'll turn up on that stuff. Because I would love. The Avenger shirt that I have has both those characters on it, and I'm happy about that.
It's just that it's not. I just don't think it's some massive conspiracy. I don't think it's.
I think it's not. I don't think that there's like a Montgomery Burns type who's like, yes, we've excluded all the women. But I do think that there are marketers and people that are involved with putting these things together that do intentionally exclude women or unintentionally do it and don't have enough conscience or consciousness to realize what they're doing. So if they bitch, something might change. So I say let them keep bitching about that part. Just, there's a difference between bitching about the lack of representation in merchandise and bitching about Joss Whedon's story and trying to act like that guy hasn't been producing feminist works for fucking 20 years.
It's Twitter.
He gave you Buffy. That alone is more than almost anybody in media.
He's grandfathered
he's fucking grandfathered in.
And he just deleted his Twitter account, and I love that.
But it wasn't related to that. He didn't like Twitter, and he only signed on to promote Much Ado About Nothing, and he knew that there was going to be a bunch of bullshit related to the Avengers, and he just shut the shit down. So it's got
one of his
nothing
last
to do with
posts,
the feminist turning
was
on him.
retweeting somebody who took all of those mentions on his timeline and put it into one giant image, and it's just all these people just screaming at him about you. How could you do this to Natasha? Oh my God, you're an animal. You're a fucking piece of shit. Like, just, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Like, horrible stuff. And it's like, really, dude? So I think he just took that as the opportunity to shut the shit down. Like, oh yeah, that's what I meant to do this. And
and then the men's rights guy got in there to that didn't help either.
No, it just makes it worse.
It's just bad people and more bad people yelling at each other as loudly as possible.
And there's some of it with Game of Thrones too, where it's like, I can't believe someone got raped in this episode.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I've got to call bullshit on that too. That's really fucking on my nerves. If you want to say there aren't enough dicks in Game of Thrones and there's not enough gay sex, not enough male nudity, okay, fine. I'm a big fan of equal opportunity. If you want to see naked people and you like the male form, I think you should have that opportunity. But this is a fucking rapey show. This is a murdery show. This is a fucking nasty, mean-spirited show. It always has been. Just because your sensibilities have gotten increasingly delicate as time's gone on and we were all becoming more sensitive in part because we're in rage culture now where everybody's getting offended by everything anyway. So you're starting to walk around on eggshells in social media of any kind. But don't fucking tell me that Game of Thrones wasn't always a fucked up show. That's all. The first fucking episode, you got brothers and sisters fucking and they murder a child or almost murder a child to try to cover that shit up. Don't tell me that show was ever virtuous. How you receive the show has changed. You've become sensitized. You don't want to watch it anymore. You can't handle that. Fine. But don't fucking pretend like it wasn't that from the very beginning.
Yeah, I can't. I see these recap articles the next day and I'm like, really?
Well, I mean, clickbaiting thought pieces and total agenda bullshit.
Total clickbaiting. Absolutely clickbait. Everything is clickbaiting now. It's out of control. Anyway. Next comment is from Count Druncula. Still listening to the episode, but I had to pipe in early and say Illegal Machine, aka Il Mac, comparing Pietro to the cologne-soaked douche selling iPhone cases at the mall cracked me up. Thank you. Then he says, Veronica, Betty, anyone? Yeah, we got it. Sorry, we did not get it immediately. That's on us. Ultron captured Black Widow because ScarJo was way pregnant in the scenes when Ultron is taking her and she's locked in the cell. She's either curled up in a ball on the ground or seated, or it's close-up shots of her so you can't see the baby bump. Thor's whole vision quest was gutted in the editing room. Whedon said there was a lot more to that subplot. Maybe that part would have made more sense if it had another 10 minutes. Here's a fun game. Go back to the first 2 teasers and trailers for this film and count how many specific shots were not in the final film. It's crazy. And I think we noticed that. Like you caught that with the whole Captain America opening up the big doors,
Right.
which was like one of the big iconic images from the trailer.
The black lady that's in there with Thor during his Vision Quest thing that we don't know anything about.
I was like, who is that? It never was in the movie, right?
Yeah,
It's,
gotta
like,
find out.
it's hilarious. Our next comment.
And again, with the whole Black Widow thing, it's like it's this two-edged sword. On the one hand, we all want to be like, yeah, let's give women equal rights, let's give them maternity leave, all this other kind of stuff. But when you're in the middle of the multi-billion-dollar multi-film franchise, and the main female actress you have decides now's the time that she wants to get pregnant, when you're trying to do the sequel to one of the highest-grossing movies of all time, it fucks shit up, and you kind of have to acknowledge that. And if so it's an issue, and I know it's fucked up that that's an issue, but it gets in the way of people making money, and that makes a difference. That makes a difference in a lot of different ways.
Yep.
So it's fucked up. There's some wrongness in there, but there's also like, okay, I can kind of understand why you wouldn't want your shit fucked up because your actress got pregnant. Your actors can go impregnate somebody and it won't fuck your shit up, but the actress can fuck your shit up by getting pregnant.
It's just the way it is.
And I think that it probably fucked up the Avengers 2 movie, and I think that Joss Whedon is a champ for making sure she was in there as much as she was, but obviously some dumb shit came out of that, because that whole story thing with the whole thing with her getting captured by Ultron, I hated that.
Yeah.
But it was probably necessitated by needing to because she's pregnant and you can't do shit with her all of a sudden. So you want him to just recast the role? You don't think people are going to be yelling about that shit?
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't just not have her in the movie very much at all. Otherwise, people are going to freak out about that. Whatever. He was damned if he did, damned if he did.
Well, but the other thing though is, okay, so let's get some more women in here.
Yeah.
We've got Scarlet Witch. Let's get a few more female characters. Let's get Tiger in there. I'd dig on some Tiger, and that should probably be a lot of CGI anyway. So get some more women, and if a woman has to sit out a particular movie because of something like that, you got some more there. It's not the one woman you've got.
Agreed. Okay. More chicks, guys.
Speaking of more chicks, Darcy wrote, I never read any of the Ultimate titles either, and I'm getting really tired of getting a hand wave when Pym didn't invent Ultron. Vision doesn't have Simon Williams' brain patterns. Wanda doesn't have hex powers because that's how it is in the Ultimates. Someone who does read the Ultimates, please chime in. I'll second Frank's comparison of Age of Ultron to Man of Steel. Well done, sir. So
I didn't read the Ultimates
yeah, I've read some Ultimates. It's not. I understand why they would want to adapt that because it's much more cinematic than the regular Marvel universe. It's just that I like the more fanciful aspects of comics, and I like when that stuff gets translated. And that's why I was so excited about the Vision popping up in this movies. There are things in the Ultimate universe that would not bode well in future Marvel movies involving certain characters, and I don't want to see them go in those directions. I'm certainly glad that the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were not handled in the way that they were in the comics. Same goes for Black Widow. Those characters all did really fucked up shit in the Ultimates comics that wouldn't work well for Disney, much less the story that they're trying to tell. So, and I'm glad that the Falcon costume's gotten away from the one from the Ultimate Universe, because it's a guy with gray wings and a black and gray uniform that's boring. Kids don't want to buy an action figure of some guy that's that dully dressed.
Iron Man looked like crap too in the Ultimates.
Yeah. So, I take from what works, but please ditch the stuff that doesn't work. And I don't think that's as much of an issue though. I mean, I think that they're going to draw from all the comics now. I think the fact that they're getting into Thanos and Infinity Gauntlet stuff means that they're trying to get away from the Ultimates universe. And there's only so much material that's worthwhile, that's worth tapping in that universe anyway at this point.
Yeah.
They only lasted so long, and there's only so much that was any good. Basically, once you hit Ultimatum, there's not a lot left beyond Miles Morales that anybody gives a shit about.
And our final comment is from Kyle Binning. He says, are you guys still alive? I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually going through withdrawals. I miss Mac and his wrong opinion. I know there's other Rolled-Blind podcasts, but MHSP is my favorite of the lot. We're back.
Hey, mine too. So I'm totally with you, dude.
The Marvel Superheroes Podcast is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Marvel Entertainment. All characters mentioned and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.
Do it again. It's funny. What? Do it again.
No, I'm telling you, this is your podcast.
No.
Yes.
Why please?
It's our podcast.
Your podcast.
It's our podcast.
You've got the idlehead of
My podcast sucks. My podcast
it does not suck.
Is lame.
So you tried to say that because the Marvel SHP podcast is different than the Idlehead of Diabolu podcast, so that means that this is all of our podcasts and that's yours, and that's bullshit. I told you it's because you have range. You're able to do both. You can do serious and you can do slapstick podcasts, whatever ours is.
I'm the straight man on this
Fixit and I
podcast.
have one setting, and it's fuck you.
Fuck yeah! That's our only setting.
But we need
We're
that.
guest stars.
The podcasting world needs that. We need the setting of fuck you. Guys like me are a dime a dozen. There are plenty of guys out there that can talk boring.
No.
Take yourself, motherfucker.
That's that low self-esteem I keep telling you about, man.
It's our podcast. I could not do this podcast without you guys. Okay, it's just simple as that. It wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work.
Right, but that's like, look, this is your podcast. You're Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay, well, no, I
George. You need Kramer and George Costanza.
Yeah, absolutely, because Seinfeld's the worst part of Seinfeld.
No, but you can't have. But it's his show.
Honestly, I think you could take Seinfeld out of Seinfeld and you'd still have a good show.
No, you could not.
You need everybody else.
Straight guy. We talked about straight
Yeah. You know what?
George could be a straight guy.
You're the sun in our revolving universe. You keep it steady and straight.
Right.
Me and Mac here, we're all over the fucking place.
But that's good.
Like,
It's entertaining.
Jupiter and Uranus.
It's just like on my way.
And he was spitting out of it a little while ago.
On my way over here, I didn't feel like trying to hook up my tablet to my car's radio because it was all,
First world problem.
Right, no kidding.
Shout out to the poor kids in Sri Lanka listening to this.
Yeah, I'm sure that we get a lot of penetration in that
our
market.
setting is fuck you.
The white male couldn't get his iPad hooked up to his car stereo on the way over here.
Poor pitiful.
Damn you! No!
The horror.
God's curse.
The horror.
So anyway, it was raining and I didn't want to unpack my connections with my tablet. So anyway, I was trying to find something to listen to, and all my USB shit's all cluttered up with podcast shit now. So I'm like, fuck, man, I don't want to listen to any more podcast shit. I'm about to go record podcast shit. I'm tired of stuff. And then I found the Patsy Walker episode. With you two.
Nah, the one we fought.
And I'm just listening to it, and it's like, okay, well, this one I can listen to. This I can jam on the way over to Mac's place. So, because that's the one that entertains me the most still.
No, see, what I do is I play the Islehead of Diabolu podcast backwards.
And there's all kinds of satanic shit coming out of that.
Yeah. I got the messages you're sending.
Sacrifice them all. Their blood is good.
1957, John Jones made his first appearance. Satan, eat your family.
We pray to the dark gods.
His first appearance happened 5 years after Mr. Takitani, and
That guy like was going to come back.
Here, Ozzy Osbourne in the background.
My arms bend backwards.
All of a sudden you see portals from hell opening up in the background.
He has a similar costume to John Carter of Mars. And
hey, I got a letter in response to that particular comment.
What?
Guy's like, I've been reading Marshmallow comics for 50 years. I never caught that. Wow, really? Shit. Okay, cool.
Caught what?
The Marshmallow's costume is basically the same as John Carter's from the Edgar Rice Burroughs books from the 20s.
He's got the X across his chest.
The bandolier with the, yeah.
And they're both from Mars.
And that's how interesting that is. He's on our podcast and he's already tuned out of it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying. Mr. Fixit could never listen to the Islehead podcast.
They're your podcast.
He would be bored
shit. Honestly,
you would be bored shitless listening to that podcast.
We did one podcast without you, and granted, we did it behind your back, kind of like as a goof.
And it was terrible.
Dude,
no, it wasn't.
So hard. Dude,
it was so much better. Actually,
it was so fucking hard for us to do.
Didn't I have this conversation?
Dude, how long were we here to do that one little podcast?
I don't know.
Dude, we could not function, dude. When you have two assholes,
it was good. It was fine.
You need the straight guy in the middle.
I've been listening to a lot of the old episodes to work on like annuals and shit, and the worst ones are the ones where we're talking about like current events, like the convention ones, and that shit's fucking boring. But yours, there's nothing wrong with y'all's podcast.
Trust me, dude. We know.
I listened to it recently. I had to listen to it because the majority of that podcast is in the annual, so I listened to it. It sounded great. Anyway.